Hey, somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to say it. So, no, I'm not putting that on you. But um,
Happy to.
okay, well, good. Good. So,
Hey, Selby. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Emily. Hi, Jesus.
Hey, I'm almost home, so I'll be on my phone for the next 15 minutes or so.
thanks. Well, you all know I always have a check-in question handy, little connection for content. What is something that you consider yourself a subject matter expert in that is not work related? Like, don't give me a work answer. But like, what's a thing that people would be like, oh, whoa, really? So it took me a while because I'm like, I don't think I'm that smart or like anything worthwhile, but I actually can read a topographic map pretty darn well and like can navigate with one. And I mean, I spend a lot of time outside, right, in the woods, so like but like I feel like that's still kind of a rare skill. And maybe
That is a for real skill. My brother-in-law can do that, and it is incredible the places he can get us to that I would never be able to find on my own.
I'm not going to claim I'm like really that good at it, but I think I'm better than the average. How about that? So,
Who else? Who's got a non-work related cool talent?
This is Emily. I know it's not at all cool, but I feel like I know exactly how to make my wife laugh. Like it doesn't matter like what kind of day she is or if I've annoyed her to like the 11th degree. I know how to make her giggle.
that
That's
is
very sweet.
that is a very important talent for you specifically to have, Emily.
I know. Thank God, because man, you can imagine being married to me. I'm not easy.
Being married to a lawyer's got to be tough. Is she a lawyer?
Exactly.
Is she a
She's
lawyer
also a
too?
lawyer. Yeah,
She
so
is? Oh God.
she's got a
Okay.
good callus built up, so
Okay. Yeah. Uh, nice. Hi, folks.
Jesus used to play competitive Pokemon.
Whoa.
That's pretty awesome. And April used to play a game in undergrad called Stump the Music Major. Were you a music major? Interesting path.
Tell me more about this. Yeah. Like what?
I should have stuck to my day job.
What? Like instrument, vocal,
Voice and piano.
voice, voice and
And then
piano.
I tore a vocal cord. I wonder why, as I talked to you darn much, and switched to African American studies.
I originally started out as a chemical engineering major.
Maybe that's
Not
what.
could not hack it, it turns out. I need women's bathrooms in the building where I'm studying.
Wow. Maybe that's what we need to do for one of these. Is like, what did you think you were going to be when you grew up? And see where that goes, right? For those of you that are joining, the question today, until we get quorum, for those that want to play along, is what is like, what would you consider yourself a subject matter expert in that is not work related?
Adam Peterson wants to teach us all how to train for triathlons. Wilson Stark is a subject matter in cats.
How many cats do you have, Allison? Oh, you got to pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers.
Yeah, my husband at one point had 12 cats growing up, but they were mostly outdoors. So I think it's a family endeavor on our subject matter expertise.
Adam Peterson wants to know the animal or the play or the Jason Derulo movie.
Annette. Okay.
Selby, gardening and canning home goods. That's an excellent practical skill.
I did know that about Selby. I remember you shared that with me years ago at the Alliance conference. And I was like, oh, yeah, nice. Uh,
if the world falls apart, I want Selby and Adam with me.
Reading the map and canning my food.
That's it.
unfortunately, if the world ends, my expiration date is about a month. And so like my life expectancy tragically drops quickly. Um,
If Allison brought her cats, maybe your odds would go up.
No, nope. Um, uh, Annette, maybe we can expect some pound cakes in a month or two when we get together in person. Not to like pressure you at all, but like if we got baked goods, you know.
Can do that.
Cody, okay. World of Warcraft builds his own computers. Like that's a legit skill.
I want to know what a unique subject matter expertise in bad bumper stickers looks like, Zafir.
Okay, so like funny story. Right before the meeting started, I was actually so I've been working on bumper stickers because I do conventions and stuff. And I have some that I just finished. And I was like, man, these are not funny at all. And then I posted it to like my group friend Discord, and they're all like, no, like I need those now. So I think I can consider myself um I wish I could turn my camera around. I could show you guys. A bad bumper sticker connoisseur, if nothing else.
Christy also is volunteering to bake some pavlova, which is meringue by another name. Not that I'm gonna say it's meringue. I know it's not meringue, but like that is also a skill. Being able to get a meringue to stiffen. It's that's hard. I learned that from my grandma. I don't think I can do that ever again, but she tried to teach me. Jesus is the meme lord. Okay, so I got that down. Hi, folks.
One more person for quorum.
We need one more person for quorum. So for those of you that haven't had a chance to participate, we're just asking, what is one thing that you would consider yourself a subject matter expert in outside of like what you do for work?
So Adam, continuing the apocalyptic theme, I think I could feed myself for about 3 days out of my garden, and then then I'm right out there with you.
Hey, Dana Hiddle, if you're looking to get hitched, I am a ordained priest of the Church of the Latter-day Dude. So for those of you, I'm not kidding. I have performed weddings as well. So yeah, if you want to have white Russians and wear Pendleton sweaters at your wedding, I might be your guy. So Carissa, okay. Cleaning up, trimming trees.
I just want to say that is the most Oregon thing I've ever heard.
I wear flannel when I do it.
You took the words out of my mouth because I was like, I don't even know what that is, and I'm scared to ask.
Saturday did.
Yeah.
Party.
And we do have 13.
All right. Well, thank you all as always, for indulging me in the silly things that I bring to this space while we kill a little time. So I appreciate y'all. Welcome. It is June. And it feels like June. The weather is getting better. The days are getting longer. I know that helps me feel a little better on the day to day. I hope it does for you all too. We're just gonna start with the objectives, and then we'll do roll call and talk about group agreements. So we've got spotlight on local system of cares. What do we want to know about them? We're gonna have Jana McClellan, the interim OIA director, here to kind of share some updates about her efforts at the Youth Authority and also answer questions. Got public comment as always. There's some new criteria for level of care for psychiatric treatment under the age of 21 that we'll hear about. Some strategic planning stuff. Subcommittee updates centering lived experience. This is the last meeting of our friend and colleague, April Flint Gerner. So we're going to talk about her departure and also hear from her. So we're not going to talk too much about her departure. We're mostly just going to hear from her. But feel free to express some appreciation for the work that she has done over the years here in Oregon. I know that I have appreciated the opportunity to work alongside you and get to know you. And I'm sure our paths will cross in the future again. And then just general housekeeping before we get out of here, and then we'll be in July. So yeah. You're muted, Annette. And
welcome, everyone. We're going to do roll call right now. I'm glad to see everyone here. First, Allison Stark and Sonia Little Deer Evans.
Here, Allison.
Okay, and Jackie Serrano, Sandra Santos. Okay, Robin Henderson and Anderson Du Bois.
This is Robin. I'm here.
Thank you.
Anderson will be here. I'm an associate of Anderson's.
Okay, all right, thank you. Kyle Johnson and Adam Peterson.
Adam's here.
Great, thank you. Judge Marissa Gates and Jesus Nunez Pineda.
Jesus is here.
Judge Gates will be here at 1.
Okay, thank you. Kati Mosley and Emily Cooper.
This is Kati. I'm here.
Hi, it's Emily. I'm here. And happy Pride.
Yeah. Dan Toma and Cindy Cecil.
Hello, Dan Toma here.
Right. Ebony Clark and Carissa Cousins.
Chris is here.
Great, thank you. Zafir Michael Berry and Jill Archer.
I am here.
Okay. April Flint Girder and Dana Hiddle.
Present.
Present.
Great, thank you. Andrew Grover and Alicia Overstreet.
Alicia's here.
Thank you. And Adam Rodakowski.
I am here.
And I am Annette Magicotomy, representing family and those impacted by juvenile justice on the council. Welcome, everyone. And our group agreements for our session today is family and youth are welcome to participate in the meeting at any time. Members of the public who are not youth or family members can speak during the public comment period and freely contribute to the chat. You can send a private chat to Joylene Carter, Alicia Overstreet, or myself, Annette Magicotomy, if you have a comment you want someone else to say for you. Our group agreements, be present and participate. Varied and opposing ideas are welcome. Challenge ideas, not people. Focus on improving our system of care for Oregon. Practice respect. Avoid interrupting and use the name and pronouns people introduce themselves with. Honor those with quieter voices. Lean in or lean back. Be mindful of the power dynamics in the room. Avoid acronyms. Use the chat to write definitions or ask for clarification. Avoid problem solving for individual situations or crises, and propose solutions. Adam?
Thanks for that. Sorry. So the GARE tool, right? The Government Accountability for Racial Equity tool is what the council has agreed upon to use to consider racial disproportionality in all of our decisions. We have to ask the following questions every time we make a decision on policy, program, or budget. Those four questions are: what are the racial equity impacts of this decision? Who will benefit from or be burdened by this decision? Are there strategies to mitigate any unintended consequences? And is completion of the full racial equity worksheet warranted? I do just want to encourage folks to consider these thoroughly as we're making decisions. I know that my concern is that sometimes when we adopt things like this, they just kind of get like there's kind of this silence when we ask that question, and folks maybe don't respond if they do have that question. I just want to encourage people to lean in and actively consider those questions and speak up if you do have some thoughts about it. And I just want to commit to doing that myself as well. So the other thing I wanted to just mention before we get into more of our agenda today is we've got an upcoming Youth with Intellectual Developmental Disability and Mental Health Summit in Corvallis on August 6th. It runs from 9 to 4:30 and is in person. I'm encouraging everybody on this call, but specifically System of Care Advisory Council voting members, if you can, to please attend that. The keynote speaker is Guy Stevens, speaking on the need for trauma-informed, neuroscience-aligned, relationship-driven, and collaborative approaches to create more inclusive environments. The registration info is in the chat. And really, Guy is from the Alliance to End Restraint and Seclusion. And we've had a lot of conversation about restraint and seclusion in this meeting over the last 6-9 months. And I think we are all in agreement that we do not want to see increases in restraint and seclusion occurring with our children. And so while it's been a tough and complex discussion, and we have folks on kind of both ends of the spectrum here in this council, we are all in agreement on that. And I think we need to continue to lean into where we have common ground and be in a place where we're listening to hear instead of listening to respond. And my fear is that a little bit of that has happened over the last 6 months. And so I think this is a great opportunity, as whatever happens with our bill, as we move forward for kids and families in Oregon, that we go and learn and be open, and then we have some of that shared language and shared understanding to continue to move forward, because we are all here for the same purpose. And sometimes it feels like we're coming at it from really different spaces, but we need to remain focused on what our goal is, and that is to do better for kids and families in Oregon. And so I think this would be a great opportunity. I'm encouraging everybody to go. And then I'm going to say this: Gobi's all staff is the exact same day in the Dalles, and so I'm not going to be there. I do. So I know that me endorsing it and asking you to come and then saying I'm not going to be able to come, I'm just being upfront with you all, right? But I will say that I don't want more kids to be restrained. I don't want more kids to be secluded. I don't think anybody on this call does. And so if you get the opportunity, please do attend, and let's lean in together and do hard things, which creates better outcomes for kids. So thanks for letting me soapbox for a second there.
Thank you, Adam. All right. Now Anna's going to lead us in putting the spotlight on our local system of care. So the system of care coordinators want the SOCAC to better understand their work. What are you curious about, and what details do you want? So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Anna.
Thanks so much, Annette. And heads up, Allison, I will be calling you out here in a minute. So the system of care staff have been going around to our various local system of care partners and engaging them in our strategic planning process. And one of the suggestions that had come up and has come up multiple times over the course of the past few years has been building a better connection and dialogue, a bi-directional conversation between our local systems of care and the SOCAC, the state level system of care body. And so we, for a while, had system of care coordinators coming in and kind of putting a little spotlight. For a while, it was like, what are we doing with the grant funds that you give us? But we're really looking for deeper relationship, deeper understanding of what the state has the authority and capacity to do, what the locals are responsible for, what the resources that they have look like. And the truth is, local systems of care are incredibly diverse. So Selby's here from the Tri-County. Her system of care is responsible for about 60% of Oregon's children in the state. And they get $200,000 from us in a grant. And then Chris Barnes, who is not here, she's the system of care coordinator for Eastern Oregon. She has about 60% of the land mass in the state of Oregon, and they get $200,000 in grant money from us. So understanding sort of what they're bringing to the table and what they're responsible for, I think, is something that we all can do better at. And Allison came to us local system when a Selby's actually a Tri-County convening. And I'm just wondering, Allison, if you have any, like, I had a light bulb moment in that room that you could share, and then we can give our local system of care coordinators some questions to answer as they start coming in at the beginning of our meetings and sharing a little spotlight on their work and how it connects to ours.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to do the Tri-Counties and then Marion, and I cannot remember. Is it Kane? Is it Clark? Kane?
Polk.
Polk, sorry. And so what I would say is that it was great. I want to actually, I asked Stelby for the Tri-Counties if I could kind of continue to attend. I think it's important to be really embedded and understand what's actually happening on the ground level. I think the system of care tends to be really, really, really high looking down. And when you attend kind of one of the local meetings, you hear a lot more about the work that's happening on the ground and some of the challenges. I had the opportunity during the Tri-Counties meeting to hear somebody present on one of the, and I'm forgetting the exact language of it, but we get like a document that's kind of like, here's an issue we've identified and we're raising it up to the statewide system of care, a barrier identification. And I got the opportunity to hear a local provider talk about the challenges of kids that are experiencing problematic sexual behavior and how they have to fail up into support. And really hearing this clinician talk about these challenges, it's heartbreaking, but it also really identifies how important these local systems are of identifying problems and raising them up, but also really understanding the complexity of the issue as it is impacting the community. So it's kind of like this both bi-directional thing. And so I don't know. I think for me, in order to be a stronger council member, I think I need to be more a part of these meetings so that I can really speak from a more, I guess, educated or informed place, which is what I walked away feeling from this meeting. Obviously, I'm a provider that represents youth. Obviously, I have lots of different connections, professional connections, but really sitting on that local system of care with, providers and family members and folks, hearing their firsthand experience was really helpful.
Thanks so much, Allison. So if we're going to give our local coordinators some kind of prompt questions so that they can come in at the beginning of our meetings like we used to do and have a 10-minute sort of spotlight on themselves, on their work, what do we want to hear from them? What do we think would help us learn and grow? And how, to Allison's point, I really don't want that to be the end of our engagement with them. I want that to be the beginning of our engagement with them and thinking about how we can better engage with whatever local system we have in our region, or if we don't have everybody to, somebody local to go to every system, how we can kind of spread ourselves out and make sure we are aware of the really great work that's happening at the local level. So what questions would you want to know? What are you curious about our local system partners? Local SOC partners, I guess I should say.
Well, Emily raised her hand. She's being polite, so Emily can go before me.
You're already talking, Andrew. Go for it.
It'll be quick. I think it's always helpful to know what are the top 2 or 3 priorities that you have for the next year, 2 years, 3 years? What are you working on? And, what are you going to need to make it happen? Something along those lines.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Emily?
I I agree. That was going to be one of the things I was going to mention, but considering my space on the as the chair of the grants committee, I also think it's really cool and I'd love them to like report out on successes. I mean, we know of all of these gaps and all of these systems that are broken, and that's why we're here to coordinate all these systems. But like, what are they seeing on the local ground level that's really working and that they're excited about? And then related, what are some of the youth and family engagement strategies they've used that they've seen that have worked? Like some of the locals are doing such cool work that maybe we can even like hear from them and implement on from our side of things. So those are the 2 things I would want to ask.
Thanks, Emily. Adam?
Yes, I would. I think yes to both the things that Andrew and Emily said, and then maybe just in addition is like, do you feel like our efforts are impacting you, like in your local community? And specifically thinking about the strategic plan, does it feel relevant to you in your local community? Because if we're missing on those 2 things, we should probably do some course correction. And so I know that we're in the strategic planning process now. I certainly want the local system of care folks involved in that. And so, yeah, those would be the kind of the 2 things for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. And then just calling out in the chat, Sonia Little Deer Evans says, what has success with youth and family engagement looked like for you? So it's a little bit of a different question than what successful strategies are you using to engage youth and families? I think Sonia's question is more like, how has that engagement changed the work or led the work, impacted the work? So sort of twofold. And Cindy Cecil says, are they getting support from school administrators? Probably we could have a whole 4-hour meeting on the system of care engagement with schools and successes and challenges that we've seen there. And then Selby, if you want to go ahead and unmute and say your comment out loud, you're very welcome to, or I can read it for you.
Hi, sure, I can do that. Hi, I'm Selby. I'm the System of Care Specialist, sometimes called System of Care Coordinator for Tri-County System of Care in Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah. And I was just reflecting that given the busy schedule you all have as SOCAC members, again, always welcome to just drop in upon occasion and visit us. But if you're not able to do that, I would really encourage that you assign staff to your agency to participate as regular members in our system of care, and then simply build in a sustainable communication practice with your staff where you're hearing and learning about what's going on at our local systems of care. So for example, you have Andrew from Youth Villages on SOCAC, and we have 2 staff members from Youth Village who attend both our executive council and our practice level work group. And so it's great to have that follow through with Youth Villages, and also the reassurance knowing that Andrew is in touch with those staff people and in touch with system of care at all levels that way. So I was building on that example as a possibility.
I love that, Selby. And the example is really helpful because I was like, SOCAC staff can't come to all the system of care meetings, but no, you don't mean us. You mean agency and provider staff coming in and showing up in the conversation.
Yeah, I apologize if my text wasn't in the chat wasn't clear. Yeah, the agency
That's
staff.
probably just me reading to respond instead of reading to understand. Any other comments or suggestions for what we want to hear or know about local systems of care before we move to our next agenda item?
I'd like to know what are some similarities between the regions instead of the differences. So what are the differences, I guess, and then what are some similarities that families and youth seem to be experiencing across the state of Oregon?
So, and then another comment in the chat about Family Voice. So really, really lots of interest from the council on that particular topic as well. How are you engaging Family Voice is this particular question. Well, thanks, y'all. We will take that down in the notes. We will get that to our local system of care specialists or coordinators or whatever their titles are. Give them some good prompts and hopefully continue to build meaningful dialogue that shores us all up as we continue to do this work together.
Thank you, Anna. Gonna turn it over to Adam.
Yeah, thanks, folks. So yeah, next we have 45 minutes to hear from and engage with Jana McClellan, who's the interim director of the Oregon Youth Authority. For folks that may not be as familiar, there have been some pretty significant concerns at the Oregon Youth Authority that have come to light. They have had some leadership change. Jana has accepted the task to lead this agency through a really tenuous time. And try and make some significant change to improve the safety and care of the young folks that the Youth Authority is responsible for. So we'll have about 20 minutes for questions and discussion at the end. And I do just want to say thank you to Jana for you being here and for being willing to accept a role at an organization in a really challenging time that has a lot of trust to rebuild and improvements to make. And thank you for being here and spending some time with us. So I'll turn it over to you.
Adam, thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Good. Thumbs up from Anna. And I feel like I'm about as large as a human being can be on screen, so I apologize for that.
No, I did that to you on purpose so that
Wow.
because with all the squares, it's hard to
Wow.
focus on the speaker. So I spotlighted you. You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad that the room's poorly lit, or you would really see large dark circles under my eyes. Instead, they're hidden. Good afternoon, everyone. Jana McClellan, as Adam mentioned, interim director for the Oregon Youth Authority. I use the she, her pronouns. And Adam, as you were introducing me, I was thinking there's 5 or 6 people on this call that could have said, yeah, I know her because she did this about 6 years ago, pre-COVID with child welfare. So shout out to my child welfare friends and my OHA friends. And Dana Hiddle, I saw you were on the call, and it's been too long for us connecting. So it's nice to see some familiar faces, and I know there's many more people that don't know me. I'd love to take just a minute or two to give you some background about who I am. I'm sitting in a room with my coworker, Sandra Santos, who is one of the assistant directors, as you well know. She's on your committee, but one of the assistant directors of the 5 assistant directors at the Oregon Youth Authority, and she is over the community services realm of our work. So she's going to do a little bit of intro for some of you about our systems, and then I'll do the majority of the conversation about the current state of affairs we're in. We do want to make sure that we leave some time for questions at the end. I want to make sure that we're hearing from you what you want us to hear. Any concerns that you have that I either can answer or can get back to you on. We want to make sure we leave time for that. So let me start with, if it's June 3rd, I was supposed to retire 5 months and 3 days ago. I moved from the Department of Human Services, where I had been for about 10 years. I came in through the DD door and oversaw the stabilization and crisis unit for 5 or 6 years. And then Fairborse asked me to step in as deputy director for child welfare. I did that from August to April until the current child welfare director was forced into retirement, frankly, removed from her position. And I took over when child welfare was having a lot of concerns about out-of-state placements for youth in our care. Sarah Fox and I testified, I think it was about weekly, maybe it was every other week, in front of the subcommittee, Human Service Subcommittee, on those placements for a number of months. Rebecca Jones-Gaston came in. I went back to being deputy director. April came on board. COVID hit. I left the department and went to work with OHA on a joint COVID response for a couple of years, came back and worked in self-sufficiency for about a year, and then thought I would end my career at the Oregon Youth Authority. I started my career 1 million years ago in juvenile justice in Multnomah County, working with gang kids in the late 80s and early 90s. when the challenges and the problems were just starting in our state. So I felt like it was a full circle moment. Literally thought the job would be easier than what I was doing at DHS, and have proven myself wrong about every single day for the last 2 years and a few months. So stepped into an interim deputy director role for Joe last early winter, and then the crisis happened, discovery happened around some challenges, and I'll probably start my story there. So when I started working for Joe in a deputy role, I had come in through a facility services door, so I oversaw the 9 facilities for 2 years. And then as I was trying to retire, Joe said, "Would you carry the deputy role?" It was vacant for a while. "Would you carry that role for me?" And while we go through long session is the least of things that I like in my life. Somehow I ended up working in government, both at the local level in Multnomah County and the state level, and I don't want to work for politicians. I want to do good work with youth serving agencies and systems of care. So somehow I said, sure, I'm happy to do the operations, you do the ledge work. We knew we needed to look at our professional standards office operation. Professional Standards Office, I'm going to call it PSO. That is the office that does investigations that come to the agency from our youth. Youth make a complaint, they call a reporting line, and it is tracked. It opened, the complaint is opened, investigated, and tracked. When I was in facilities, I was not able to quite understand how that system worked. I didn't feel that it was as responsive as I thought it could be to the youth in our care on the facility side. But frankly, I didn't oversee it. So we figured out workarounds. Joe said, let's try and figure it out. When I was working with the chief investigator at the time, I couldn't get him to describe to me from start to finish on when he got a complaint, how the case was handled. So I said to the chief investigator, I'd like to bring in a peer review for a process improvement. Brought 2 folks in from the Department of Corrections who had experience with investigations, and frankly, one of them had experience with the Youth Authority. They had been a former chief investigator about 14 years ago. They came in and for a 2-week, a quick kind of just assessment of our process. How could we do it better? It was a place for me to launch from in early January. By about the 3rd day, Ken came to me and said, "Jana, I think this is not a problem about your process. I think it's a problem more deeply entrenched around case investigation." And so I said, okay, let's get this finished. I need to see the report. 2 weeks or a week and a half later, was handed a report that did a few things. And before I kind of jump into that report launched for us a series of events that included the chief investigator resigning the day that report was handed to Joe and myself, and a month later, Joe being put out on leave, and a month later, Joe being terminated. So I kind of had my fingers on the professional standards office piece of this. As Joe was placed on paid administrative leave, I stepped into an acting director role, and then an interim role as he was terminated. So that's kind of the December to March. What we'd like to do today, you all had some very specific questions about youth safety, what we're doing to protect our youth, how we're trying to improve some of the processes, some harm reduction efforts, and then lastly, an ask of how you can support the work we're doing. So I'd love to, we've got about, it's not even 24 slides. I think it's maybe 20 slides. I'd love to walk through all of that, and then, as I mentioned, take some questions at the end. Before I get started, though, I would like to turn it over to my coworker, Sandra Santos, and have her both introduce herself and then start the slide presentation, if we can get that to work.
Yep, sure. Can you hear me? I'm trying. We're in the same room, both on laptops, and we're going to use Jana's sound, but we can switch that if I feel faint or you hear me faint.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. I got a strong voice. It carries. So hi everyone, Sandra Santos, she, her, ella pronouns. I think most of you know me. I am sit on this council as well. I'm not always super vocal, but I am always here. I am the Assistant Director of Community Services, and that means all things community for OYA. I oversee our parole and probation teams throughout the state, our community residential programs. We have 30 plus community residential programs, as many of you are aware, and we have foster care and victim engagement, all things community. I was going to be here anyways for this meeting, and then Jen and I had to travel for another group that we are going to speak with. And so it seemed right that maybe I would help present with all of you since we all know each other. And I wanted to be here anyways. So I can't stay for the whole meeting, but I'm happy to be here. And I wanted to share a little bit. I suggested that maybe we do a little bit of background of the juvenile justice system. And so I'm going to do that piece really quickly. I want to make sure, just to level set a little bit, to make sure that not everyone quite understands kind of the juvenile justice system, county level versus state. And so I just thought I would clarify that for people. I know there are a couple of you on here that probably could correct me or do this piece with me because you know it better than I do probably. But I will do my best and then turn it back over to Jana to talk to you about the professional standards office stuff. I will say that I know that some of you have been very much a part of some of the community work that we've done. Some of you have already seen us present. Jen and I have been presenting to a lot of community groups, a lot of our partners, to share all of the efforts we have made, are making, will continue to make to work towards I don't even know what it's called, making sure our youth are safe, I guess I'd say. So I know that some of you may have seen some of this presentation before. Annette, I'm going to try to share. Can I do that? Can I share this presentation?
Do you have a little green box at the bottom of your Zoom? Then yes.
Tell me if it works. I'm okay.
There you go.
Yes?
We're seeing it like you're seeing it. So if you want it to just be the big slide, go to slideshow.
I do this. Hide thumbnail.
Or just do that. I don't know how that works,
That
but there you go.
That work? Okay. And just interrupt if you have questions, please. Good to see everyone, by the way. Oh, I scroll down.
Arrows not work.
No.
Page down. Enter.
Yay. Gonna work.
If you go to the top, it says slideshow right next to animations. You should be able to select that.
Also, for you, are gonna save my life is what you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Down. So transitions, animations, slideshow, up a little bit.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
There you go. I'm
Thank
like
goodness you
pointing
can
at it
see,
with my
like-
mouse. So, and then click from beginning right there on the left, and we should be good to go.
Okay.
There we go.
Awesome. Knew someone on here knew what they were doing. So I'm just going to start off by sharing just how our juvenile justice system here in the state of Oregon, it's not the same in every state, kind of the flow of things. And this is like a messy chart of the flow of things, and it's one of the cleanest ones I've ever seen. So it starts at the very beginning of, a law enforcement referral. They're called referrals in the juvenile justice system rather than an arrest. But what it means is a youth is accused of committing a crime, and that all the referrals across the state are sent to the local county juvenile departments. And from there, the juvenile department makes a decision on how to handle that referral, whether it be, the do nothing, which can sometimes be, it could be informal sanctions, it could be a diversion program, it could be a formal accountability agreement. It could be referring to other services, or it could be adjudication or sending a youth through the formal court process. If they go through the informal process, then generally the county juvenile departments do a whole bunch of different, provide a bunch of different services, interventions, referrals, and that's usually the end of it. And fortunately for everyone, the majority of the cases that come through juvenile departments go informal and are handled informally and never come back, which is really lovely. So occasionally there are a number of cases that for what the gravity of the crime or the impact of the victim or the behaviors of the youth rise to the level that a petition has to be filed and the youth has to go through the formal court system. Again, this is all at county level and at the county juvenile departments. In that case, a petition is filed and either the youth is found within the jurisdiction of the court and they're adjudicated, or on occasion, the case is dismissed, is not found within the jurisdiction, and the case goes away. But when they are adjudicated, then the youth is more often than not placed on local county probation, and the juvenile departments do all their fantastic work and provide services and oversight, supervision, work with schools, work with mental health, work with all of your systems to help make sure the youth gets what they need and keep them from further penetrating into the system. On occasion, the youth is not successful, or there are youth that, because of the gravity of the crime, they cannot be worked with at the county level, and so they go to court and they're committed to the Oregon Youth Authority. I'm going to show you a slide right after this that kind of shows you the numbers so that you can see really the majority of the youth in the state of Oregon are handled at the county level, which is what we would prefer because we believe that kids belong in their communities and really can be successful in their communities. And it's really just a small bite of a piece of the pie of the youth that come to us. And when a youth is committed to OYA, they are committed in two different ways. They are either committed to close custody, which is into one of our 9 correctional facilities, or they're committed on probation to us, where they more than likely will end up in one of our residential care programs or foster care. Still on probation, but out of the home. Typically, when youth are committed to OIA, it's because either all services have been exhausted or there is a reason why the youth needs to either leave the place that they're living in or their community for a period of time. So that's kind of just the flow of the system. That's not telling you anything other than hopefully helping you understand kind of how a youth gets to us. Are there any initial questions about this piece? No? Great.
If you have a question, raise your Zoom hand or just unmute and speak up. It's really hard to see folks when we have the presentation up. I don't want to take up any more time, so let's just move to the next.
Okay, so this was just like they call that the Pac-Man, which maybe some of the younger folks in the group aren't going to understand that reference, although I have a feeling that you probably do. But this is just to help kind of the 303,000 youth from 12 to 17 in the state of Oregon, the big yellow Pac-Man head. About 2,258, the green section, are the youth that are on county juvenile probation. Just as involved is about 3,446, but they're not all placed on probation. As I told you, many of the youth are worked informally. And then from there, you see the very, very tiny number of youth that actually come to OIA. And I'm trying to move this because the heads are in the way of my slide. And you can see right now, I think this is a number from January. We have 513 youth that are in the community on either parole or probation. So they're either in one of our residential programs, foster care, living independently, living back in their homes. And then we have about 375 youth that are in close custody. So that would mean either in one of our correctional facilities or in one of our transition camps. Just to give you all a picture of the number of youth that we're dealing with from the state. And there you go, Jenna.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Same rules apply. If you've got a question, shout it out, interrupt me. I'm not offended, or raise your hand. We'll also plan for time at the end here. Something happened that has me there. No one wants to hear me twice. Few want to hear me even once. So Sandra mentioned the 888 kids. I so love the fact they picked a number I could remember that are in the care of the Oregon Youth Authority. It's a good number to kind of hold. What I do want to do right now is just address a few numbers that people read about in the newspapers. So I mentioned in January the chief investigator resigned. Joe was placed on leave the next month on February 14th. And I always like to just take a minute here and honor the fact that Joe had a long career in state government. He'd worked for the Youth Authority for, I think, about a dozen years, both as deputy and as a director. And those of us that are in positions of leadership know that's never how one wants to end their career. So I really do want to acknowledge this. We didn't get here because of a person, and we're not going to get out of here because of another person. The system failed. It failed over the course of 7 or 8 years, and it is going to take time to get us out of it. It is also going to take both strong leadership, accountability, and frankly, laser focus. But I do like to put this slide up because there was a lot of stories in the news. There's a few numbers that I think are really disconcerting, and I like to make sure I explain them. So an aged case, you'll see that we had 733. Again, this is at the time that we could figure out how to count a case. I also like to give the caveat here that every number you're going to see is not a number that was created prior to the crisis. Prior to the crisis, we were not using any data tracking tools, any data for management and oversight, any data for tracking cases, or any reporting metrics. That's a pretty big problem, and it's a pretty big problem, frankly, for an agency that holds one of its 3 operating principles to be using data to inform decisions. So somehow, and I hadn't been here long enough, but somehow we were not using data in the best possible way to manage this unit, the Professional Standards Office. It has 6 individuals, a chief investigator, 3 investigators, and 2 administrative staff. What was reported in the news, which was true, was as of, I'll say January, but it was the middle of January, I think. We reported 733 aged cases. An aged case is a case that has been open from the day the complaint was made and longer than 6 months. So we had 733 cases that went back as far as 7 years that had not been completed, had not had an investigation completed. This is also when I tell you that in the course of a year, that unit of 6 people handled on average for the last 3 years, 710 cases. So I'm now telling you that what we found was over a year's worth on average of cases that were never investigated, in addition to the year ahead, which we predicted would be 710 cases based on average. That's a big problem. That's a big problem. Again, those are complaints that came to us. I couldn't tell you of what variety as of this date. I will be able to tell you that at the end of this presentation. But in January, I could not tell you what kind of complaints those were. We also had an additional 3,500 cases that were unsigned. That's a huge number, but it is a huge number of cases that had been worked over the last 7 years by the investigator. They made a recommendation for disposition, and then the tracking system requires the chief investor to go read the investigation, affirm the findings, and click a button, simply click a button that closes it by the chief investigator. 3,500 of those were not clicked. Completed investigations, but not reviewed by the chief investigator and signed off. Besides the fact that that's best practice, you have two people look at a case, make sure the findings make sense, make sure the case is well written, and close it. What we lost was an opportunity for 7 years to look at 3,500 cases and not offer any improvement for case investigation, for training, for seeing themes of policy violations, of practices that we were concerned about. So it's a big number. We have made a commitment to go back and look at every one of those cases, read through them, make sure we believe they were appropriately investigated, and affirm the finding by the new interim chief investigator, clicking the button to close it. I will tell you, it is a slow and laborious process, and there have been minimal incidents, but there have been incidents where the chief investigator, the current interim chief investigator, will not close the case. He has reopened it because he did not feel the investigation was conducted in a best practice orientation. So those are the two numbers that were bandied about in March and February, March. And those are the two numbers, as I show you more data, that you will see market improvement. And you can't get out of a problem that is, the weight of it is a year's worth of work. What the report also found in the peer findings was we needed better oversight, more accountability of staff. We needed to coordinate with our DHS and our OSP state police partners. When a case is opened, if there's any sniff of or concern about the complaint is of a criminal nature, we suspend the case. That's a status we use. We suspend it. We stop doing work on it, and we report it to DHS if it involves child abuse or neglect, and we report it to the state police if it has different criminal charges that need to be looked into. We had fractured that partnership, and I'm probably being kind to say it was just fractured. Frankly, it had eroded beyond repair in terms of an ongoing relationship with our partners doing the work on behalf of the youth in our care. We also had a finding of a recommendation from our peer review of better reporting mechanisms and transparency around PSO progress. I mentioned that the data, in fact, wasn't working for us. And you'll see that last bullet really being around case tracking database and migrating data. So that's what the findings were. That sets the stage. What I'd like to do next is move into family and community engagement, talk a little bit about some of the things we have done. You can imagine, for those of us that have lived through situations where our agencies, either public, nonprofit, or state, in this case, go through a bit of a crisis. There is a lot of calls to action about doing better. I have given this presentation to a number of groups. I want to walk through some of the groups that we've done that with, but I also start with, we know we failed the youth in our care. We failed the trust our partners had in us. We failed the trust, frankly, that our staff had in us. We did not do the right thing. We've worked really hard for the last 3+ months to make sure that we show up differently, both in our work for our agency, but also in partnership to rebuild the trust and confidence that we know the agency has lost simply by this kind of a situation. 3 areas that we've really tried to
Thanks,
make
Jana.
sure.
Sorry, can I just
Absolutely.
we're at time for the presentation, so I do want to. We've got 20 minutes for questions, but I want to give you time to complete the presentation. But I just want you to know if you could do it
Speed
as
it up.
succinctly as possible.
You got it. So this lists 3 areas. The call outs that I like to make here are, we've really tried to update our outreach to our families. We are trying to build some trauma-informed after-action resources for youth that are impacted. Community and partner agencies, we've done a lot of these presentations with our county partners, with our judicial partners, with our justice partners, and our attorneys, and then public accountability. For those of you that like to nerd out on legislative hearings, the first day of our Ways and Means testimony, I was called to task and I reported much of what you're going to hear today. We also are providing weekly updates through data to our legislative partners and our county partners. And then also we have a process improvement plan that we are working, and each month we are making sure that that is shared more broadly.
And we should just add that we are answering a lot of the questions that were forwarded to us in our presentation. So hopefully we will get to some of those questions, Adam, if we go over.
And I know you've got a tight agenda. So next slide shows our commitment to make sure that every youth that does make a call to the reporting line is responded to with a personal phone call from an investigator. We've doubled some investigator efforts in terms of FTE, so we are making sure that they are immediately within the 24-hour period getting a phone call back to let them know we received the complaint and we've opened the investigation. We'll slide forward. I just want to remind folks we have 9 advisory committees. I've done my best. The agency's done their best to make sure that we're reaching out to these advisory committees, both to continue the relationship around concern around youth that have made complaints. Where are they? We also are trying to make sure that we stay committed with our advisory committees to keep them apprised of where the agency is in this work. There was a lot of reverberation of people being completely surprised by this and by Joe's long-standing relationship with them. So we've really tried to do our best to make sure that our partners in our work understand the need for that relationship. Most importantly, perhaps, or one of the key successes I think we've had in the last few months has been that we have been able to hire and fund. Our budget was approved, so we do have funding for this position for the next 2 years, a youth and family advocate. We have a long-standing partner in our work. K.O. Berger has most recently come from the public defender's office, but she has a long history of representing youth in our care in court, and is well versed in all things OIA, more importantly, actually well versed in all things juvenile justice, and is a strong advocate for the youth in our care. She has started to dig in very quickly with making sure that she is available to youth in our families in our care in close custody, as well as our community programs. She is going around in a series of listening tours. I know she has made an ask of us in partnership with you all to see if we can get her in front of this group to start building that relationship. I think she will be a tremendous resource for the agency. She also, for the next year, will be building what this role will look like. I know we've had this role when I was at DHS, and it can go a lot of directions, but I do think right now it is a role that will be holding us accountable for areas where we stumble or miss opportunities to do better for our youth. The next section talks about reporting harm, repairing harm, sorry. What we've got is just a kind of a plan, do, study, act, continuous improvement feedback loop. I just want to call out that we really are trying to make sure that we're listening to our partners in this and that we are engaging as best we can with what we know we're doing in terms of sharing what our findings are, taking accountability and responsibility for what happened so that we can continue to improve on our process. Next slide talks about our aged case plans. Those are the ones that are over 180 days old. You can imagine every day I've got, another day of opportunity for an aged case. 3 areas that we're tracking: positions. We, through the budget process, will be able to bring on 6 new positions, a deputy chief investigator, so we have some redundancy, oversight, and ability to take those 3,500 cases and try and address them through a chief investigator lens, as well as additional investigators and an HR partner. That was one of the areas that we've missed. We've also been rotating folks in from Otis, from our DHS partners investigation arm, as well as a retired investigator. We've improved a lot of processes. I've talked about some specific case assignments, making sure that we are coming at this with a trauma-informed lens, and that we're addressing the trauma and the harm that we have created for youth that weren't heard from for all those years. And then also just trying to do a better job tracking. We're looking at a new case management system that, frankly, we've had authority to purchase for the last 3 years. It was never acted upon, so we're trying to make sure that we get in there and handle that as best we can. The next slide starts to talk about data. Adam, I'm going as fast as I can. What this looks at is all the cases currently with PSO. So this is recent and aged. I use this slide to call out. You will see the aged cases by year. So you'll see nearly 400. I mean, this is current as of last week, I think. This is data that's produced every Friday for me. So we've got nearly 400 open cases that we need to work that are over 6 months old, and we've got an additional 100 cases that are suspended, referred out to DHS or OSP. I like to go on the record and have everyone hear me say those 100 cases, I would guess that of the 104, 103 of them are because we didn't do our job. It is rare from what we are finding that our partners are the ones that dropped the ball. We simply didn't get the feedback loop closed. So while we reach out and figure out what the disposition was from DHS and OSP, those aged suspended cases will become aged open cases because we will need to finish our investigation. And then the yellow half of the slide talks about those 3,500, not that 3,500 number. You can see we've got it down to 3,000. Still needing the chief investigator sign off. And then you can see that we have been able on the aged cases to address 997 of them. So the 3,500 number was closer to 4,000, right? It was over 4,000. And again,
Let's pivot and go to questions.
Okay, happy to do that.
We know that I've seen some hands, and we saw that from Adam, that the time check. Would it be better for us just to go straight to questions? We know y'all don't have a lot
think
of
so.
time.
I saw that Alicia had her hand up. Alicia, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just I received a message asking if we could also get the family and youth advocates information.
Sure, we'll put it in the chat. We'll also send it to Anna, and she is an employee that works for the governor's office. We're funding her, but she is based out of the governor's office, so she has her independence, and we'll make sure you get that by day's end.
Annette.
Yes, Jana and Sandra, nice to see you again. I just want to make sure that I mentioned that you started your career working with kids and families.
We can't hear. Could you speak up, please?
It's got a weird feedback.
There's like a weird echo on your mic right now, Annette.
Hello? Is that better?
Much better.
Oh, great.
Okay.
I'm glad they can hear you.
All right. I just want to say that, I met you a few weeks ago, and I want to say that you started your career helping kids in Northeast Portland, gang impacted families. So I think with Rosemary Anderson, our founder, I think that's very important to mention, because from what I see in your career path, you've continued on that journey. So I think it's important to say that. With that said, I do want to ask what efforts have gone into connecting with families, I know KO is going to be doing some listening sessions. So how have families reacted to the outreach portion?
Can you hear me? Perfect. Annette, thank you very much for your question. And just a shout out, you have been extra involved in a couple of different of our efforts these last few months. So I just want to thank you for that too. I think what we've been trying to do is make sure that the youth that were impacted have access to KO, but also have access to their staff and have access to the PSO line. So the responsivity to the line is, for me, that's where it happens, right? The youth should call, the youth should get called back, the youth should get updated as to the investigation. Our interim chief investigator, Ken Jeske, has done a lot of work with his team, putting those investigators in the facilities so that there is relationship building there with staff, but also access to them and the youth. We have, if not already once, I think we're on the schedule again for the Family Advisory Council. We're trying to make sure that we are doing the outreach we can. With that, we've also asked all staff to be extra vigilant in paying attention to youth who may have questions, and make sure those questions come to the reporting line, to the team in PSO, but also just making sure at each facility and in community that we are keeping an ear to attention or questions that come up about this. I think that questions come both around PSO, but it also comes with changes in leadership. Joe's not here. Joe was a known commodity to a lot of our youth. And so I think we're trying as best we can. If you all have areas that we can do outreach that we've missed, or ways of doing outreach that we haven't done well enough, we would love to hear that from you.
Let me add as well about our after action planning. So we have recognized that there is going to be a need to wrap back around, possibly with youth who are victims and their families. And we've started a work group. I want to say, I don't remember when we started it, but we started a work group to start planning with our victim engagement program. We have some county involvement and the professional standards office, our PREA coordinator, our victim engagement manager, to develop a process for how we support youth and families that are identified as victims in the aged cases, and frankly, for all future cases that come up. So we're just in the process of doing that, and we are looking for some support from community members to give us feedback. Our intention is to bring it all through our family advisory committee and our youth advisory committee to get feedback on, to make sure that we're not missing anything, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the youth and families. We are building MOUs with different community-based programs and trying to figure out how to make sure that if they would like it, that we are able to offer support and services after the fact. So I think that kind of gets at what you're trying to ask about, Annette, but we are still, I mean, we're in the process of identifying victims, and then we're needing to develop a process of how to support them, offer services. We won't probably be doing any of the services ourselves, but we want to make sure that we are being the connectors for youth and families, and making sure that they know where they can go to access support and services.
Adam?
Yeah, I think my question's more related to like the current situation, right? Like there's obviously been these past harms, right, that need to be addressed and learned from. And my question is, what has changed to make the children that are currently today residing in closed custody safer? And like I've seen reports, right? Like I've just seen reports. I don't know the validity, right? But there are some pretty disturbing things that have been alleged that were occurring as a pattern among staff. Has there been any change to like monitoring staff? I saw that you said the investigators are more likely to be stationed in, it sounds like, in those facilities. But what other steps have been taken to ensure that the staff are caring for kids and not doing anything untoward or inappropriate sexually, bringing in contraband, etc.?
Can you hear me, Adam?
Yep.
Okay. Lots is the answer. And I've been in a series of these conversations, and the question always comes up like you've just asked it. And I'm going to say that we work hard every day to make you safer, to make staff safer, to help build better relationships. And every day I know we can do better. So I want to just set the table with that. With regard to internal controls, specifically about PSO, I meet every day with the PSO interim chief. We talk about what's going on. We look at numbers. I've got PSO and HR meeting regularly, talking about cases, case investigations, areas that we need staff investigated differently than we have been investigating staff. The governor's office is meeting with me twice a month, and the governor's office is meeting with PSO leadership as policy allows for, that we've never done on a regular basis. We also had everyone go through retraining around PSO and PRIA, which I appreciate the non-trauma informed comment in the chat section of that. And we've reset expectations around filing investigations, fidelity to process. We've retrained every employee in all facilities in person on the what we call the top 10 or the 10 commandments of policies that we are seeing themes that are constantly being violated. And then we are implementing, we call it individual coaching, but it is through our HR lens that sometimes is ending up in performance plans. So we are trying everything we can to make sure people know how to do their job, show up and do their job, are held accountable when they don't do their job through the means that we have as state employees. I mentioned the youth advocate. We also have established a safety task force or a safety advisory council. Annette is on it. We have a number of other representation there. They're meeting once a month. KO is chairing that group. We're going through all the processes that we do to be able to make sure that we are protecting our youth, presenting it to the council and getting their feedback. We've only had one meeting. I think the next meeting is this month's end, but we do have kind of an what I call an external advisory group. And then lastly, and coincidentally, I will say, but lastly, we are on the docket for a Secretary of State audit the second half of this year. The audit area of study was last year determined to be youth safety. As I've testified in front of the Ways and Means, that's a pretty broad topic. I can imagine that they will come in and they may specifically look at our professional standards office around youth safety. I don't know yet. They're giving us the privilege of getting through Ways and Means before they come back to us, but we'll have that audit started here in the next month or so, and I imagine that will be a 6 to 12 month audit on what we are doing. So trying to make sure that we've got everybody's focus on the jobs they were hired to do, making sure that we're reviewing policy, and then also just trying to make sure that we're talking about it. Did we really do it, and is it getting better?
Anna has her hand up.
Thanks, Sandra. A couple of things in the chat, and then I have a question of my own. So, Alicia asked is the peer review report publicly available? Maybe you already responded to that, but if so, I didn't catch the answer.
I didn't respond. You could probably go to the Oregonian and find it, but we'll make sure that we send you all the link. It is publicly available. Yes.
Okay, great. We can send that out, Jenna. If you can get that to us, staff will make sure the council has access to it, and we can, if you want it posted on our website with the other meeting materials, we can do that as well for transparency's
perfect
sake. And then another question from Alicia: are you planning on or considering bringing in forensic psychologists who specialize in juvenile justice?
That's not an area to date that we've looked at. We certainly can look at it. We're in this really kind of odd period because we also are in the middle of hiring for a new director that I hope is towards the end of that. And so there are some things that we aren't just jumping in long term, and we need to start, or we need to keep thinking about long term, but that's not one that has been brought to my attention. So I appreciate, Alicia, the suggestion, and we can certainly look into it.
Really sure you're about to unmute and respond. Okay. And then my actual question is, in terms of to follow up on Adam's idea or Adam's concern about what are you doing to make sure that kids are safe today, and how are we kind of being really transparent about that? Again, I know that you're in an interim position, and we're thoughtful about leaving space for the new director to direct when they get there, but wondering about the idea of bringing in sort of external third-party observers just to kind of have that set of eyes that is not being paid for by OYA to sort of lend that extra super transparent layer of accountability to the experience while we continue to navigate and clean some of this up. So that's just a me suggestion, not on behalf of the whole council.
Thank you, Anna.
And then I see Anderson has a hand up, and I know we're a little over time. I really appreciate you staying a little long. I know that folks really want to have this dialogue with you. So, Anderson.
Thank you. And I'll make it really quick. In line with that, beyond like the press release, I know oftentimes when these things happen, community trust, it takes time to heal. And these conversations don't always get out of the huge level of advocacy and accountability being done. And so just wondering if there are sort of measures taking place to really broadcast these new things that are sort of coming out and the changes to build community for that, not just branding, but relationship development. So the community outside knows it's different. I can turn to my community, but there's more work to be done in that. The second part of that question is connected to what Anna was saying, is just long-term work to be done to make sure, even with this new director, that it's not just something done for a season, but that there's continual change that happens even after that new director comes in, and what could be done around that.
Yeah, Anderson, that's a really good question. I have to say, I'm not about to tell you how well we're doing and have you believe me. I think I need more time to pass so that we can show you how well we're doing with the numbers. I think going through legislative session, being asked twice through Public Safety Ways and Means Subcommittee, and then once with the Judiciary Committee, I was trying to make sure they understood both our handle on the problem and our go forward plan. I'm not going to tell you we're doing great. I'm going to sit here and tell you with all honesty that we're doing better. You don't need to trust me, but I need to show you that. Time will allow us to do that. In the long term, I can share with you when this originally broke, we gave the governor's office a number of options of places that we believed could make a difference at that point in time, and they agreed and directed us on many of them. One of the ones that we suggested was having someone come in immediately and do a deeper dive from the peer review. The peer review literally was 2 weeks. We did not know how big the problem was. Did it make sense to do a deeper dive on the problem so then in a year or in some longer period of time, you could say how well you're doing? And in fact, they said, you all get your systems in order. We'll come back in a year. And who the will is, I don't know, but we'll come back in a year and make sure you are aligning with policy and you are aligning with practice. We are seeing improvement. We are seeing responsivity on the PSO piece. That's different, frankly, than the number of lawsuits that we have, what you're reading in the paper about a class action suit or the next lawsuit or the addition to the last lawsuit. Those are separate, and yet I would tell you they're probably root causes upstream look the same. So I think that we're trying to make sure we're in the crisis, dealing with the crisis, responding to the right crisis, setting up the best system. And I think longer term, you are absolutely right. When we can figure out, more of the upstream investments that's happening at OIA, and we've got a lot of eyes on us right now between lawsuits, class action, tort claims, and this crisis, that I think things like a Secretary of State audit, I think things like the Safety Task Force looking into us, which has a lot of people that are not champions of our work. They are critics of our work, and that's what we need. So I hope we've invited the right people to the table to continue to hold us accountable to doing a better job for the youth in our care.
I'll just add to that, Anderson, that yes, we are getting a new director. Jana, we have to let Jana go at some point. But many of us are not leaving, or at least not forecasted in leaving anytime soon. And it is equally important to us that the changes be made and that they are sustained. We care internally deeply about the safety of our youth. And so as much as, of course, new leadership can always mean lots of things, and there's some anxiety around that, we are not, those of us that you all know that are committed to this work and are committed to kid safety, most of us are still here. And we still are moving this forward and very much committed. So, and I am part of this committee, and I am here every month with you and happy to answer any questions and talk to you all about the ongoing work that we are doing.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks to both of you for being here, and Sandra, obviously you every month with us as a member. Jana, thanks for being here and answering our questions and being very frank in your responses. I, for one, personally appreciate that quite a bit. So thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Annette.
All right. Thank you again, Jana and Sandra. Now it's time for public comment. So we're going to open the floor for anyone who has a public comment about things that they've heard during this meeting and other concerns as well. So right now the floor is open for public comment. If you do not feel comfortable sharing on the mic, you can email or text chat Alicia Overstreet, Joylene Carter, or myself, and we will voice those concerns for you. All right, the floor is open for public comment. And Anna has put in the chat, if you have questions for OYA that we didn't get to, please email them to Corinna Hazard. Her email is there, and we'll include, just include OYA question in the subject line. We'll gather those and send them to Sandra and Jana for response.
Nobody?
Nobody?
I mean, I'll say it again because some people have joined, and I'll give people a minute to think if they have public comment. Please do check out the Mental Health Intellectual Developmental Disability Summit, August 6th, I believe it is. It would be great to see folks there. Obviously, we're all moving towards a system that is more trauma informed and reduces the need for seclusion and restraint. And there is an opportunity to learn from some national experts and hear from them on that at that time. So for those of you that weren't here at the start, I'll just say it again.
Floor is still open for public comment. Seeing no hands raised.
Selby?
Yeah, I just was thinking I could make a quick comment that might be of interest to the council. I just thought you might like to know that the System of Care Coordinators, we had a peer summit this past month that we self-organized, and we met for a day and a half down in Douglas County System of Care in Bend, hosted by Danny McAllister, our coordinator there. And there were 14 of us there, and we spent a day and a half doing a lot of round robin table discussions about system of care, our local systems of care, everything from orientation to, yes, how we'd like to engage with SOCAC to how we're resolving barriers. And so just wanted to give a great shout out to all the my fellow local system of care coordinators and let you know that we are a really strong network in support of the work you do and are interested in the work you do, and that we had this really wonderful time to come together and engage really intensely in our system of care work. So just a little point of interest to share. Thanks.
Cool.
Thank you, Shelby.
This is Joylene. I did receive a question that I'm just going to ask out loud. If there are any youth who are interested in attending OYA meetings, are they welcome to, and what information should they know in order to get involved?
I think we might have lost both Sandra and Jana.
We can add that to the list of follow-up questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think they had a in-person thing that they were staying late here to go do, but let's make sure that's in the email follow-up. And then Joylene, if you can get the contact person of whoever asked the question, we can do the daisy chain and make sure they get perfect.
Okay, at this point, seeing no other hands raised for public comment, our next action is break. So right now it is 2 o'clock. So if you want to come back. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Folks still trickling in. Great. All right, we're going to have our agency presentation from OHA. Jenny Claiborne and some of her colleagues from OHA are here to share a working draft of the level of care criteria for Medicaid psych under 21 benefit. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Jenny and her team.
And did you all bring your own slides or did you want us to share those?
I'm working on sharing the screen right now, so we'll be able to share them. Thanks, Anna.
Got you, Ashley.
Hi, I'm Jenny Claiborne, but I am going to invite Chelsea Holcomb to do our introduction for us.
Thank you. Hi, all. Chelsea Holcomb. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at the Oregon Health Authority and oversee child and family behavioral health. And while this is a Medicaid-led project, I think you will all quickly see how it overlaps into the children's system as a whole. And there is some overlap into some of the behavioral health work with psychiatric residential treatment facilities. So just quick overview, and there's much more detail in the slides, but there was when Oregon started home and community-based services for children in Oregon, some of you know this as the K plan, for children who have or qualify through intellectual and developmental disabilities or medically complex conditions. There was also a Oregon commitment to also provide home and community-based services for children through behavioral health conditions. As many of you are aware, we don't have that set up in Oregon, and kids, there isn't a way for children or families to access these services at this point based on a mental health condition. So in Senate Bill 1557, which we can put the link in the chat, it asks the Oregon Health Authority to get started on figuring out what is that pathway for children who would qualify for, again, this is a federal term, psych under 21, to be able to access those services. And so a reminder, those are services, those are not behavioral health treatment services, but home and community-based services like supporting daily living or toileting or eating or routines. There's a variety of services that are and they can be offered in addition to mental health treatment and supports. So as our team is, we've done a couple reports, again, that you can see on the website and around evaluating all of the different ways that Oregon's going to move forward to make these services available. One of the steps that we're going to talk about is around the clinical criteria of eligibility. And so this is one baby step in a big, big project to make this happen for children in Oregon. But it's a really important step because not only would it impact sort of who's eligible to receive these services, it's also going to be standardized across what's called Psych Under 21, which is also eligibility for children who need psychiatric residential treatment facility level of care and hospital level of care. So when we create this criteria, it's going to impact multiple pathways. And so I'm here mostly to do any translating around that and also answer questions around what that would look like for psychiatric residential treatment facilities. So that's sort of a general overview. Again, there's lots more detail in the slide, but I will hand it back over to Jenny and team to walk us through where we're at.
Great. Thank you, Chelsea, for the intro. So I'm Jenny Claiborne, she, her pronouns, and I have my title as well as the team with Ashley and then our manager, Cassie LeBeau. Next slide, please. So the objectives, sorry, I can't talk today, for today are to establish that understanding of medical necessity and the Psych Under 21 services, to review how that looks in Oregon, and then to review the draft Psych Under 21 criteria itself. Next slide, please. As Chelsea mentioned, Psych Under 21, but medical necessity is to a federal law that requires all to cover those what is medical necessity under what's listed here. And then it exists on the state level, whether it's in the plan for services available to the members or eligible members. And then it kind of lists out here what Oregon was doing in the beginning of January 2023, where it lists that to cover all medically necessary and medically appropriate services for OHP members under the age of 21, regardless of placement on the prioritized list of health services. Next slide. And then this just lists the definitions of medical necessity. So it's a broad standard in the federal law, where the states, so it's broad federally, but then the states go into focus and design to improve health or lessen the impact of condition, prevent condition, or restore health. And then it's broad in the spectrum of the health areas. And then it's just stating that most states have the criteria definitions specific to individual services to help provide some type of standardization. Next slide, please. Now we kind of get into the psych under 21 services. This is also a federal term. And then services under this benefit is under in Oregon, provide services through the Psychiatric Residential Treatment Facilities, or PRTF. And some services may be provided in home and community-based services instead of institutional settings, depending on the medical authority and then depending on what that individual member would present, as far as like if they go through the level of care and they can do it in home versus in the institutional setting. Next slide, please. And this is currently what we're doing in Oregon. So currently Oregon provides this in those settings, the PRTF and PRTS. And then we are, us as OHA is developing a standardized set of criteria, and that's what we're gonna go over in this meeting today to see what the youth, if they meet that criteria. Next slide. These are just the current federal rules and then the current Oregon administrative rules. So I'm not going to read through that, but we did, I believe, PDF these to Anna. If not, we can do that, and then she can send it out, and these links will be available to anyone who wants more information around that. And then just pointing out that both federal and state regulations require that certificate of need. Next slide. So here we kind of get to the why now. Chelsea briefly described it, but we're currently developing a standardized set of psych under 21 level of care criteria. It's in draft form, and it could or could not have an assessment tool or a functional needs assessment, as we call it. And then currently it just states that open card or fee for service is administered by Comagin, and then it has flexibility for specific criteria that will be used to meet those requirements in the institutional setting. And then the providers that are PRTFs establish their own criteria. And then the 1915K hospital criteria are not designed to meet primary behavioral health needs. And this just mentions that Oregon, we're exploring the correct authority right now. We haven't made a decision on the pathway we're taking, but that is going to a leadership meeting to decide that. So that will be future talks when we decide which path we're taking. Next slide.
Jenny, Emily Cooper has her hand up. Are you allowing
Oh,
questions right now or at the end?
sure.
Okay, go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, Annette. So if you go back to the previous slide, the why now, you have the last bullet is if Oregon explores other federal Medicaid authorities to provide access to home and community-based services for youth with intensive behavioral health needs. We've been talking about this for a while with some of our mobile crisis. I can't remember what the acronym stands for. Someone help me maybe. But I think part of this, and I'm going to be candid, is a little gobbledygooky. And so it's helpful for us to understand like why now? And is this because Oregon changed how we do our Medicaid? And we're just wanting to make sure that youth, no matter where they are, whether they're in home and community, they're being considered for residential, that there's a standard process so there's no wrong door. Like I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit in my mind. And then also, how does this fit in with what are the other options on the Medicaid side for home and community? Those are kind of my two big questions.
I could probably give a shot at that, and maybe the Medicaid team can fill in. The why now for sure is the piece where I talked about how we don't have a pathway to these home and community-based services. So again, not behavioral health treatment. We have a pathway for that, but these other services, and we need to develop that. And as part of that pathway, this is that front door, right? Of like, who's eligible for home and community-based services based on a behavioral health diagnosis. So we have to stay under that umbrella of psych under 21, that definition, the federal definition. And then we don't have that standardized in Oregon. We don't have a standard criteria for psych res or psychiatric residential treatment. We have rules, CCOs have their process, providers have their but we don't have a standardized like set of clinical criteria. So in order to kind of develop which authority are we going to go through with CMS, with Medicaid to do this, this is one of those first pieces of the puzzle, if that makes sense. And that's why it impacts both, right? It impacts the home and community base, and because we didn't standardize it, it's going to have a change and impact to our current system in behavioral health. Did I get both questions or only one?
I think you definitely, the why now, and that it's making sure we've got criteria. I would just urge to think about, especially if you're trying to get feedback from community members, it's said it a little more plainly so that we know what feedback you're looking for. Because like I'm not a clinician, so I can't tell you anything clinically.
Right.
But I can sure tell you that I think it's frustrating when it's the criteria is different depending on who you ask. And so uniformity is wonderful.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, and this is more towards my second question, is so that youth and family who are engaging in these services, it's good to know here's your continuum, here's your option. Like psych residential, what we look for is XYZ. Your child is only presenting as X and Y. And so another option that you may be eligible for is mobile crisis and wraparound or something like that. So and so that's kind of my second question, or what are the other services under Medicaid that we're wanting to make sure the rules are the same for? And then also
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Absolutely. And it may be a little too in the weeds, so we could potentially come back. I don't want to use up all the time on the agenda, but those different like the different authorizations or criteria for intensive in-home or mobile crisis are definitely separate from this. So this is that high level of care that we're talking about, but 100%. Just because you meet that high level of care doesn't mean psych res or home and community-based services are your only option to support your youth and family. So point taken for sure.
Thank you. Okay, next slide.
Jenny, did we do the second why now?
Yeah, no, we're on to part 2. Sorry.
Okay, there you go.
I think Chelsea kind of went over this in the part 2, though. We don't have a standardized set of criteria, so we're developing that. And then there has been other efforts here. We put the bill, Senate Bill 1557, but also in current legislation, there's Senate Bill 909, which is in Ways and Means, but we don't know if that's going to go through or not. So that's kind of in a hold there. And then we just wanted to mention that Oregon OAR rule changes go into that. I see a couple hands. So Robin, I think you were first.
Robin, if you're talking, you might still be muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting off mute. So my question is, there's standardized criteria. I mean, the Colocus, the CASI, the Milliman stuff, there's all kinds of standardized criteria. Why yet again are we being unique and going out there and recreating something when there are standard materials used nationally that we could be using? I mean, I see Oregon do this all the time and it never serves us well. And it's expensive.
Yeah, I could take that one a little bit. I mean, I think this won't be a tool. So Robin, to your point, like this stage that we're in is more around like what's going to go into rule and standardize across the state. Depending on which Medicaid authority we go with, we might have to do a tool like the CASI, which I know in some areas I'm like always afraid to say, like we might have to bring back the CASI or something like it. But this would be that just the base level criteria. And I think to your point, the feedback we've had so far, and actually Jill just put it in the chat, is looking at how do we utilize what our CCOs are utilizing. Some of them are using, different software, but there's, could we standardize what CCOs are already using around looking at medical necessity and medical appropriateness and make sure that the language and the work that we did with this is standardized to exactly that, not have unintended consequences. Those softwares are, proprietary, so they aren't transparent. Like it's not like everybody sees what's in those, but it would be really helpful to make sure that whatever we put in rule or into process is standardized across the state and then matches and supports what the CCOs are already doing. But no tool yet. But I'm not promising we won't come back, Robin, and tell you a tool's coming. It depends on that Medicaid pathway.
Alicia has her hand up, and there's because the chat doesn't end up on the recording. I think there's an important point that was made here from Adam Peterson asking, will it make it more difficult for PRTS facilities to admit Medicaid youth or easier to admit? So more difficult or less difficult to admit Medicaid youth into psych res. And Chelsea's response was, our hope is for more standardized, predictable, and therefore easier process. So I just wanted to say that out loud so that people can see it when they're watching the recording. And then Alicia has her hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my question is really kind of along the lines of what Robin asked. Like if this is really like a federal, if there's a federal guide to this, right, and other states have to do this as well, why can't we just look at what other states are doing and how they're looking at it in terms of their Medicaid pathways that they're using? Is there a reason for that? Or is it, it wouldn't make more sense if we could just like look at what other states are doing and then see if it fits in with what we already have established. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Alicia, this is Cassie. And I think that that's a great comment. We are actually looking into what other states do. So that is part of what is driving all of this work. We're actually working with a contractor to not just look at, what Medicaid authorities that they use, but things like how they determine reimbursement rates for their providers, how they recruit and retrain recruit and train and retain, sorry, can't keep my R words together, a really robust and responsive workforce for this population as well. We're also looking at, how they outreach, how they have continuous outreach and engagement with youth and families. So there is a future report coming that will help, I think, give some of that information that you're looking for. But one thing that we know is that states kind of generally get to do these things differently. That's the opportunity that they get, because I don't think the feds necessarily can tell us which specific authority we have to pursue to meet whatever the requirements are. But we are looking at where states are having the most success, and I want to be transparent, not every state is getting it 100% right. So really looking at what has worked for states who have maybe similar populations, similar challenges, and similar barriers that Oregon is facing, and how do we incorporate that in, and also be able to tailor that to the unique needs of children and youth and families in Oregon. So absolutely, as soon as we have that information kind of packaged and ready in the report that we're working on, we will definitely send that your way.
Okay, thank you. And Dan?
Thanks. Yeah, I was in a meeting yesterday where we got a similar presentation, and there was a lot of support there for using CalLocus. It is mandated for commercial insurers, and as a result, a lot of providers are using that now. And so having some consistency there would have benefits. Another thing about CalLocus is it's built on a system of care framework. And so it would address those other community supports that were mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, next slide, please. And I will turn this over to Ashley.
Thanks, Jenny. So yeah, hi, my name's Ashley Purdy, she, her pronouns. I am Medicaid's Children's Behavioral Health Clinical Review Coordinator, and also full transparency, newish to OHA. I've been here about 3.5 months at this point and come from the provider side. So just a little bit of context from the lens that I look at it through also. Let me click the right screen. Okay, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about just the basis for the proposed criteria that you all will see. So kind of to the earlier point, criteria from multiple states were reviewed, including Connecticut, New Jersey, and Ohio, and then a team of OHA and also contracted partners kind of worked together to develop this criteria. And just to reiterate what we've talked about, this is focused only on this criteria for establishing medical necessity. So we're just looking at, does this language of this criteria, does it meet that what we're looking for the scope when we're talking about eligibility? And our hope is to kind of get as much feedback as possible prior to implementing and prior to kind of planning what implementation looks like. So this group is one of many that we have chatted with. We've chatted with CCOs, insurance, families, PRTF providers, really trying to get as much input as possible to make sure that it's capturing the population that we're hoping that it does. Well, what does it do, right? We begin to establish that consistent and transparent eligibility criteria across all Psych Under 21 services. And the goal is to apply it across programs and setting consistent with the federal and state definitions. So what they don't do, and I had a lot of these questions when I first joined this work, because as a provider, I'm like, I want to know these things. So if you also have these questions, you are not alone. But it does not establish the process for implementation, what training looks like. The criteria will reference a comprehensive behavioral health evaluation. The criteria does not outline what all that entails. It also does not establish documentation required, any specific tools that may or may not be used, or what the process looks like for initial and ongoing implementation. So the hope is that once we kind of get this criteria to a point that it is as good as it is going to be in implementing, that we'll continue to have these conversations with the same groups that have given feedback on the criteria to talk about what implementation looks like. So we're going to kind of get into it. And I think Jenny is also linked in the chat the criteria PDF. So rather than me having to just only read the words to you, because I won't read them all, it'd be a lot. And as you can tell, my voice is fading. You could read along with me. But before we get into that, just some reminders that it's written for implementation in both residential and home and community-based services. That Psych Under 21 federal definition is an inpatient level of care. So it's written to be consistent with that. And I think the most important thing to hold as we're looking at it is, like, y'all know that medical necessity language is inherently kind of deficit based, right? Like the language is not strength based, it's not trauma informed. Usually the focus is let's highlight what's going wrong and let's highlight what the needs are there rather than kind of the whole person approach. So unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of way around that when establishing medical necessity. However, the hope is that as we're doing implementation and kind of the process, we'll be able to incorporate that whole person trauma-informed, person-centered lens with feedback from everyone as much as we can. So the criteria has 4 kind of main categories, and we'll go into each into detail. There's age, diagnosis, behavior or activities, and then also the most appropriate level of care. So for age, right, we're looking at under 21 years of age at time of enrollment, and then any youth recommended to receive residential treatment must be at least 5 years of age, or have the approval of an in-depth multidisciplinary, clinical consultation prior to approval. And for diagnosis, we're looking for a diagnosable mental health disorder according to the most recent DSM. And this is where it references that complete behavioral health evaluation by a licensed provider. And the important asterisk here also is that the youth may have a co-occurring intellectual or developmental disability, substance use disorder, and or physical health condition, but also has to have that mental health diagnosis to meet the Psych Under 21 experience or criteria. So the youth may not be excluded from this level of care if there is a comorbidity, regardless of if that co-occurring exasperates mental health condition. This is where I'm not going to read all of the words, but I will summarize it. But I do want y'all to like kind of take time to look at it and process it in whatever way works best for you to understand what it's saying and make sure that it's clear. So the impairment and functioning is broken into 2 slides. So this is 1 of 2. We're looking for evidence that the youth demonstrates severe or marked impairment in functioning. And this is demonstrated by at least one of the following, which is the mental health condition routinely prevents participation in age or developmentally appropriate activities and expectations in at least 2 life domains. So looking at home, school or work, and or community. It includes daily self-care, attendance, activities at home, social activities, and other activities of daily living. And it can be evidenced by maybe attendance or regular participation is lower than it normally is, right? Also documented impairment in activities, communication, or functioning due to that mental health condition. Significant disruptions in social relationships, which could include serious or extreme deterioration in interactions or significant withdrawal and avoidance of social interactions. We're looking at persistent neglect of an ability to attend a self-care and hygiene level that's appropriate for age and developmental level, and serious or extreme disruption in physical functioning, such as sleep or eating, kind of those basic physical needs due to the mental health condition. And part 2 of the impairment is if there's potential danger to self or others due to suicidal or homicidal preoccupation with or without that lethal plan or intent, significant self-injury, or those frequent and intermittent episodes of impulsiveness, aggression, risk-taking behaviors that could compromise the safety of themselves or others. Or if the youth is experiencing impairment so severe that observation or assessment cannot take place, right? So if a youth is experiencing psychosis so significant that an assessment can't be completed or social functioning can't be observed, that speaks to the level of impairment for this criteria. And then we're looking at most appropriate level of care. So for this one, A and B have to both be met, and C applies to hospital or like a PRTF setting. So wanting to make sure A, this level of care is recommended as the least restrictive, and is most clinically appropriate, because either the functioning is, and like the needs are too acute or unstable and can't be addressed in a lower setting, or like, right, that lower intervention has been tried and we're still continuing to see the regression. And the intensity of services will also promote stabilization and progression towards mental health goals, or prevent further regression based on presentation goals and needs. And then for C, we're looking at either and, right? So if the use has demonstrated a current need for a highly structured living environment, providing 24-hour treatment, monitoring, and supervision. And then only for in the hospital if there's an acute crisis with safety, or co-occurring physical health issues, or otherwise complex and intensive assessment, evaluation, monitoring, and treatment is when we would be looking at hospital level. And then for exclusion, a lot of it is around consent. So if the youth is 18 or older without a legal guardian, and does not voluntarily consent to treatment, or if the youth is under 18 or over 18 with a legal guardian, and the legal guardian does not voluntarily consent to treatment, or that complete behavioral health evaluation indicates that it's not appropriate for the youth to have this intensity of clinical intervention. These links are in the chat already, but that's the criteria in a nutshell. So if there's any questions or feedback, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see and look at y'all. And yeah, maybe, yes.
Emily?
Thanks, Annette. So Chelsea and I had a little back and forth about my concern. I think the criteria makes sense from a mental health lens, but I was starting to look at it thinking about a youth who could qualify that has both mental health and intellectual or developmental disabilities. And I saw, Chelsea, that it would apply inclusive of anything, but I'm wondering if we need to think about factors like not just suicidality or risk of harm, but like ADLs or other activities of daily living or other things that a parent or caregiver of someone who experiences intellectual and developmental disability could track that isn't exactly mapped to that criteria, but is concerning. Like for me, something I see a lot are youth that regress in terms of eating or bathing or toileting is often a sign of a lot of emotional distress. And so I defer to the clinicians on what those factors should be, but that's the only thing when I looked at it, that as I was thinking about the youth that I serve, that I would just want to make sure are addressed. And same thing with like youth with traumatic brain injury. It just might show up different.
Yeah, 100%. We had a lot of conversation around that population and just sort of the wide range of how children at all of these different ages show up and how this looks. And so 100%. I think the other language we really looped around about was also around we always have that term of least restrictive or who would benefit and things like that. And we often know that that's how some of those youth are excluded from these, because there's that narrative or bias that, these kids can't benefit or their IQ is this. And so really look forward to all of your feedback on that language, because again, the attempt was to be much more inclusive in this criteria, specifically around DD mental health and medical complexity than some of the other stuff that we've had in place. So thank you, Emily.
I see a couple of different chats with a similar theme of lacking access to the initial diagnosis being a barrier. So both Anderson and Selby kind of pointing out that challenge of if you can't even get to the point where you have access to somebody who can diagnose you, this doesn't, this is not responsive to your needs. Is that accurate? Would you say, OHA team, that unless you can get to somebody who can diagnose you, that we can't then put these criteria, we can't use these criteria to evaluate whether you're eligible for services?
I'm going to defer that to Ashley or Cassie.
I mean, I'm just going to be transparent. I think that's an inherent flaw with a lot of the work that is underway. At least from my perspective, and for context, y'all, I manage an HCBS team that is trying to build this program out for children and adults. We also see this issue in the adult system. So I definitely want to acknowledge that this is a challenge across the lifespan, and recognizing how much more difficult it is for children and youth to be able to access that diagnosis. So yes, I do. I think we can all acknowledge that that is a barrier most of the time.
Adam?
Yeah, I'll just speak up from like someone who's worked in care coordination for almost my whole career. Like a lack of a diagnosis, the level of care that we're talking about, the PRTS and PRTF level of care, is really meant for folks who have tried other things and it's been unsuccessful in a lot of different ways. And so we would really hope, and I would really hope that someone would, along the way, wouldn't need to jump immediately to a PRTS, PRTF facility, because their needs could have been met at earlier stages. I understand that crises happen and that there are places where someone might need that level of care as a first standard or first step, but that would be a very, very, very rare instance where someone wouldn't have been engaged at all in the behavioral health system and then would jump all the way to a residential treatment facility. So for me, like that, it's definitely a barrier, and access to getting an assessment, a timely assessment, is a problem, but it wouldn't necessarily impact this rule, as from my perspective, as having been worked with a lot of youth in that care coordination aspect.
Jackie?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, Chelsea, but I have a question in regards to, since we're talking about the medical criteria, is that oftentimes what we see with children going into PRTS or needing that level of care is if they have an ODD, oppositional defiant disorder, diagnosis put on their record and assigned to them, which is almost always misdiagnosed, then that really prevents them from entering into crisis level care, and is such a barrier because of the misdiagnosis. And just speaking from a family seat, like, families don't have control over that. They may be reporting behaviors that seem to a new or inexperienced clinician as ODD, and when they get misdiagnosed, then they're kind of automatically, almost always, excluded from being able to access that care. So my question is, like, how is that being addressed in regards to accessing this and medical criteria? Is there like an exclusion around children, at a certain documented level where, we just have the OIA presentation? Are
Right.
they excluded from PRTS? Like, can you talk a little bit about that? And I'm super passionate about not diagnosing ODD. If you can't already tell, I will speak up every single
Absolutely.
time about it.
It's like AKA trauma. 100%. Yes, I think what we try to do, and when you dive into the criteria, take a look at it. I think we were trying to not only look at those behaviors, because even like it was brought up earlier around, behaviors communication. So yes, there are DSM diagnoses that, solely focus on behavior, but, trying to look at clinical criteria broadly so that we are taking into account whatever behavior we're seeing, including behaviors that are underneath that diagnosis, like being oppositional or aggressive. So we tried to name that in the criteria specifically as one of the inclusive criteria, so that we weren't just looking at a child being like, oh, we're just seeing lots of behavior. So it's a behavior issue. It's not a psychiatric issue. The actual exclusionary around a diagnosis, luckily, does not exist in Oregon. When I first got here, conduct disorder, for example, was excluded on the list of approved diagnoses for psychiatric residential treatment. Autism was on there. There was a whole bunch of on the prioritized list that we used to have, and we no longer have to use that list anymore. So it really does. That's why this criteria is so important, is because we're trying to make it inclusive and try to get rid of some of those barriers. And it does not matter what the primary diagnosis is in Oregon anymore. So I hear you. I'm not saying it won't happen from like a chair side. That's like my new, like the chair side, Danelle, like a clinician being like, oh, they don't need it because it's just behavioral. That's a cultural like system issue we need to work on. But from a structural, like how we create the pathway, take a look at the language and give us feedback, because that's one that we talked about quite a bit, because we hear that from child welfare, from juvenile justice, from Oregon Youth Authority, and from families themselves.
See, Andrew's got his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple of thoughts. I spent some time looking at the work that OHSU or OHA was doing on this. I met with Chelsea yesterday, and the questions we're having now about like, can we just use the CalOCUS? Or, I saw Jill say, can we just use what the CCOs have? I think those are valid questions, and hopefully they're just kind of getting into your queue, whether somebody opens the survey or not and puts it in there. But I do want to kind of zoom out for just a quick second, because while this looks like we're just defining criteria for accessing PRTS, and we're doing that with a means to a different end in some ways. And so the idea here is that we would be able to determine if a kid needs PRTS so that they can access in-home supports. That's the important part of this whole puzzle that I want to make sure we're all on the same page about. So in order to qualify for things like what we might call in-home respite, but it's really like activities of daily living, support in your home around activities of daily living, in order to access Medicaid, to get that kind of service, for kids who have psychiatric, challenges, whatever word we want to use, we have to have these criteria in place to do it. So the end really is helping people in their homes. We have to do this as a means to that end. And it'll affect the PRTF. That was my first question yesterday to those two. It was Hillary and Chelsea. Is like, are we going to make it harder to get into psychiatric residential? And their commitment was no. So.
And Andrew, your other question in the chat, I think, deserves to be discussed out loud as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think Chelsea was kind of hitting on it, but I forget what EPSDT stands for, early and periodic something. It's a part of our Medicaid plan.
Screening, diagnostic, and testing services.
Yeah, it's a part of our Medicaid plan. And once that part of our plan went into place maybe a year ago, it basically said that any diagnosis qualifies a child, if you're a child, for behavioral health services under Medicaid, any diagnosis, so including oppositional defiant disorder. And I think Chelsea was basically saying we still have a cultural challenge to get through here, but from a technical standpoint, ODD does qualify for behavioral health services.
So while a provider can still say no, I can't take that child. I don't have the skill set. I don't have the staff. I don't have whatever. They can deny access to services. It is no longer based on the fact that Medicaid doesn't have to cover that service. It's now based on the provider's assessment of their own capacity to serve the child's needs.
Yes, great way to say that. And also EPSDT is also for all health services. So it's not just a behavioral health thing. So if you needed, certain medical, access to medical treatment, and you didn't have the right diagnosis. It's not about that. It's not about that diagnosis. It's about whether it's medically necessary or appropriate. So it is lovely that we got rid of that, because there was quite a bit of exclusionary criteria in Oregon of access to these higher levels of care.
So I have a dumb question, and I know we're over time. So I looked at Adam Rodakowski. Do we have time for me to ask a dumb question?
Well, there's no questions, dumb question, and yes, we have time. So go ahead.
So I'm probably misunderstanding this, and I would love for you to clear this up for me. But when I'm thinking of the kinds of in-home services that Andrew kind of just described around supports for activities of daily living, right? Just self-care stuff, using the bathroom, taking a shower, right? Sometimes meal preparation, like those kinds of things. That is very different from the kinds of services that people receive in psychiatric residential treatment facilities. And so I'm curious, I'm curious how the two are so connected, right? Like, are we really treating people in their homes for their psychiatric challenges, or are we what can you explain to me the difference between those sort of home-based services and why you would get those if you needed PRTF or almost needed PRTF? Is that a dumb question? Am I even making sense?
I think it's a great question. I'll let the policy people answer it, but I could paint a picture once they're done to help.
I'm just looking at our Medicaid team. Do you want me to give it a shot, Cassie, or you're going to go?
No,
for
I
it?
can. I'm going to give it a shot too. So from my seat in the Medicaid team, what we are trying to do by establishing just generally this home and community-based services for children and young adults is to create a system that provides services that can intervene earlier when if they are not there, behaviors or symptoms could maybe escalate to the point where someone needs that PRTF level of treatment. So it's really designed to be able to help again, intervene early, because what we heard a lot from children, youth and families is that they don't want to have to wait until their loved one is in crisis to be able to access those services. And so the point of the home and community-based services program for children and youth would be to be able to identify what would be helpful to a youth or their family to stabilize them, de-escalate, whatever that looks like, so that there is not necessarily a need to enter a PRTF or a PRTS. Part of this criteria is understanding what that looks like so that we can then back into what those home and community-based services might be and look like to be able to do that for them. And Andrew, if you want to expand, totally invite you to do that.
That's a good policy answer. So here, I'll paint a little picture. I'll try to make it super quick. So we operate an intensive in-home support program. We do a lot of work in homes. We're face-to-face 3 hours a week at least. We're available 24/7. We do a ton of work. But it's not uncommon for us to have a family that we're working with say, that's great, but I need somebody to help take care of my kid for 8 hours a day. And that's a different service that gets more into the activities of daily living. And then there's this other thing, instrumental activities of daily living. So it's kind of like it would be a complement to these other services. The reason that they're connected is in order to get that package, you would have to qualify for psych res. You would otherwise be in psych res unless you had these kinds of services packaged together for you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Alicia, and then I've got one in the chat as well.
Oh, yeah. I was going to start with Julie's, if you don't mind, Adam, unless you want to do it. Okay. Okay, so two things. I'm going to call out Julie's comment in the chat, and it says there's a difference between what youth needs and in parentheses, necessity, and what Medicaid or insurance is willing to pay for, which is the defined medical necessity. And I think it is important to call this out in this process. Who and what is establishing the need and how are youth and their families a part of that determination. So I think that's actually a really, really good call out because it goes to the comment that I was going to make. And while, we have all the policy folks and system folks, really explaining quite well why there is that connection between, oh geez, my acronyms, the PRTS, yes. PRTS and in this, and the community, right, in and then the need to meet that level or almost to that level in order for you to get those in-home and community-based services. So I actually, I want us to look at it from a different lens because so many times we have parents and youth and families as a whole who are saying, okay, well, if I could get my youth who has, let's say, extreme anxiety, right? And it is really difficult for them to just even get out of bed, let alone go get out of bed, brush your teeth, get clothes on, get dressed, get ready for the day, and then go off to school, right? That process alone, if the youth can have supports in the home, by someone or with someone whom they can trust other than their family or a family member or another caregiver within the family, that in itself can be super helpful in the long run and can actually prevent some of those crises that we end up seeing where we have families or parents just completely just tired and exhausted and they don't know where else to go and what else to do because their youth has such high anxiety that they can't even get their kids or their youth out of bed. And then that, as we all know, has other things that it leads down to, things like, chronic absenteeism and all of those things, right? So I really would like us to kind of shift that lens a little bit and then not only look at it from that policy perspective. And I love that you asked that question, Anna, because it's it's a policy thing. And then here is what families or here is what family members or why family members are asking for services like this, particularly for mental health diagnoses as well.
Yeah, totally, Alicia, right? It's policy, rule, law, right? Federal Medicaid law, it's all those things layered on top of each other. Yeah. That really limit the ability to factor in the real life situation happening. Yeah. Any last thoughts, comments? We are over time, but I don't want to shut down anybody with a last nugget. Okay. Well, thanks y'all for coming. I appreciate the presentation and the discussion. We've got the link in the chat for folks to fill out the survey. And we reserve the right to call y'all back.
We'd be happy to come back. So
we were pretty nice today, I feel like, compared to some days. So we're gonna jump. We're a little late. I know Abby, you've got a hard stop at 3:30, right? So we can give you your 25 minutes instead of 35. But the one and only Addie Smith, or at least the number one to us, our strategic planning consultant for our strategic plan coming up in end of the year, is here to talk to us. So go for it, Addie.
Thank you. I will say there's another Addie Smith out there who publicly testifies often, and there's a funny confusion between us. So it's amusing to me that you're like the one and only, because I often get funny messages. So excited to be here. I definitely think I can help us catch up on your agenda today. I'm excited that we're all going to get to spend 2 days together. You may or may not be as excited, but I feel like I can give up a couple minutes today because I'm going to get a lot of your time that I'm really looking forward to. So the first announcement I want to make is after some really great conversations with the strategic planning core group or committee, we've landed on a co-consultant who is available. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you, Adam. Their name is Elliot Hinkle, and I'm going to drop their website in the chat so folks can see. We're still working out some of the details, but they have confirmed and will be present for most of the meeting to co-facilitate. I know some folks on here know them and have worked with them before. I've worked with them before and have known them many years. We worked together on the Multnomah County LGBTQ juvenile justice task force together. So excited to make that announcement. I think, Christy, if you're the one sharing slides, otherwise I remember it may be Anna who does that. I know our slides are baked into the PowerPoint today. So I can talk while they're coming up, but what we're going to do today is some big picture stuff. So all of you last time probably really, really loved getting to color with me and took that very, very seriously, which I appreciate. And I think some of you, but not all, were a little skeptical about what that was about and whether we were sort of using everyone's time wisely. But I hope what you're going to see today is that although you thought you were coloring, what I was doing was a lot of sort of listening, active listening and data mining and coming up with what we're going to try and validate in our time together today. So if you remember, before we walk into our 2 days together, I've tried to set some bumpers collectively to help guide our work. Now, these are the value screens. We set these 3 meetings ago and 4 meetings ago. We did the same thing. We had an activity. I did a lot of listening. I sent you all to small rooms and you were in person, a lot of you, which was really fun. So you got to talk about your values. And then we made a lot of edits to what I had sort of proposed, having gone through a lot of really rich data. And these were the value screens that came up. So you guys have already sort of approved these. Don't worry, there'll be another chance for the conversation. But I want to remind folks about how our value screens and our goals work together. And we're going to look at them together today. And the whole goal today is just to get a sense of, are we on the right track with the goals? So these are our value screens. Every decision we make for our strategic plan needs to meet. The conversation we had was 2 to 3 of these value screens, right? It needs to fulfill 2 to 3 of these things for it to make it into the strategic plan for SOC here. So these are really guiding us in the right direction. So I'm going to move to the next slide, which is where we're going to spend the next 13 minutes today. These are very draft. So I just want to announce that these are draft. These are not set in stone. The whole purpose of today and part of our time together is to continue to work on these. But I'm going to talk through what I heard as the goals for our next strategic plan as we've been meeting and as we all got our crayons out and had a good time last time. So these goals in my mind each meet at least 2 to 3 of those value screens. And I want to remind people, goals are that big picture thing we're striving for. Then under that, there will be strategies. And then under that, there will be action steps, right? So we're talking about 3 different tiers to our strategic plan. You've got the goals, then you've got the strategies. How do we get to the goal? And then you've got the action steps, which are the like, somebody needs to send an email. Somebody needs to design a program. Like the real nitty gritty, the stuff I would nerd out and say, that's what I really like. Can't wait to get to the action steps. And, the action steps have to like, who's assigned? What's the timeline? What are the barriers? Like, okay, not everyone's as excited about that as me. That's fair. I think that's kind of why I'm here. But these are those big picture things. So what I want to do is I'm going to walk through my thinking based on what I heard. So reflect back, see if I got it right. I'm sure some of it I did and some of it I didn't. And then today I'm going to ask, and I know this is hard because I know you all know that I deeply believe that language matters. And we are going to have time to wordsmith these. Today, the question is, are each of these generally on the right track? And if they're generally on the right track, we're going to create spaces to do any wordsmithing that needs to happen. It's, as you all know, it's a little difficult to wordsmith with sort of 60 people. So we'll have different activities we set up to do that wordsmithing. So today is generally on the right track. Certainly, if there's something sort of deeply substantive or deeply problematic, that's the conversation for today. So the first one is, I think the one I'm hoping we're all the most excited about. It's what I hear the most from this group, which is creating space in the next set of years to completely transform the systems that serve children, youth, and families, right? I came in at the tail end of a pretty detailed conversation steeped in layers of federal policy with state policy, and there's comments and concerns about access and comments and concerns about definitions. All of that is super important. And I think one of the things this group seems to have come to a consensus about is we need to take a whole new look at how systems are serving children, youth, and families in Oregon, and these systems of care are working together. So I'm going to talk through all four, and then I'm going to stop talking because I know you don't want to hear from me. So one is space to come up with strategies and action steps to transform the systems that serve children, youth, and families. Two, now this is probably going to resonate as pretty familiar, right? This is all about improved access to coordinated, integrated, and community-based systems of care. So this is, while we're working on completely upending, overhauling, and innovating the system, we also know there are young people and children right now who need improved access, who need their care to be better coordinated, who need more community-based solutions, right? So we're talking sort of, the way I think about it is like parallel tracks. We want to be working on how we overhaul, reimagine, redesign, and then we also want to think about what are we doing right now to the systems we have that we know that are in place. So that's sort of goal two is, how are we doing maintenance on what's already happening? Three is promoting the co-creation of equitable policy and systems by providers and the youth and families that serve them. So this is all about, for goal one and goal two and all the work happening across the state, how do we ensure that the changes that are happening, the policies that are being created, the systems that are both happening, being transformed, et cetera, are bringing youth, families, children to the table as co-creators in everything that's happening, right? So really ensuring the strategies under here are, how do we get voices who have Medicaid expertise and state policy expertise, listening to and collaborating with and actively engaging with our individuals who have experienced the effects of those policies in the system. So that's going to be another set of strategies, another set of action steps. And then four is, and this one I think is something that I keep hearing a lot of in different spaces, which is increasing the infrastructure, capacity, and credibility of this group, right? So I have to admit, I've worked with a lot of different groups. You all have the biggest mission, and in some ways, one of the most difficult missions of an organization that I've worked with. And I think you have a staff of 4 on a good day. And that is a disservice to everyone who's on this call, and more importantly, right, to the state of Oregon, to the systems we want to transform and the systems that we want to improve. So part of that is just, how do we get you all the 4.5? I appreciate the correction, and whoever the 0.5 is, my apologies go straight to you. But how do we really get that capacity, but then also the infrastructure, right? I know a part of what this group is doing is coordinating different state agencies with different providers, trying to get everybody on the same path, moving in motion together. So what kind of infrastructure do you need? And certainly it goes without saying that as an important policy making and policy vetting and policy conversant committee, right? You all are doing a lot of the work. It's important that folks in the state know you, understand you, trust you. And so that's what I'm talking about here when I have the word credibility, right? So folks understand what it means when SOCAC is gently making a suggestion, or when the strategic plan includes actions that are going to have to happen somewhere else, all of that. So that one's really about, to support the other 3 goals, how do we get this organization as beefed up as it needs to be to do its work? So I'm going to pause. My first question is going to be, is there anything missing here? any strategy you're thinking super important, any action step you're thinking super important, and I know you haven't seen these before, so we'll have more time to simmer on these, right? I don't want anyone to feel like this is your last chance. Like I said, still in draft form. But is there anything that you're thinking that you're like, it doesn't fit under any of these four? It's out in left field and we're really missing the mark somewhere. It's not a strategy, it's not an action item, or it's a totally separate goal from these. I'm doing that thing where I'm counting in my head so that I can be better at being okay with the silence.
So I know I'm staff. Maybe I shouldn't speak up right now, but what feels missing to me is the focus on kids with complex needs. All of this is talking about community-based care and really pushing towards prevention and early intervention. And there are lots of other bodies that do that work, but we were specifically created to work to focus on kids at the top of the triangle who are involved in 3 or more systems or should be involved in 3 or more systems. And I really don't see that reflected in our value screens or in our goals at all.
So say that again. Your concern is sort of the amount, I don't want to say acuity, but making sure that our focus is based on multi-engaged system youth. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that there's some, explicit attention to kids with the most complex needs, kids who are sort of the most underserved by our systems because they need services and supports from multiple funding streams or service delivery models or whatever it is.
Totally. Super. I'm gonna go to the chat comments. I'll say it out loud for the recording and then we'll just sort of go in order. But does workforce fall into box 1? I would say workforce falls both into box 1 and box 2, right? It's the essence of what is or is not working about current systems and re-envisioning what the workforce may need to be would be about transforming the system. So I see it as fitting, but that doesn't mean we can't have more conversation. And I love thinking about workforce as part of what has to happen and what supports. Alicia, I didn't make you color today.
I appreciate that. Although I am using my daughter's I don't know what she calls these, but I am using these author pens.
Love
it. Okay, so I have one comment that came to me or one question, and it is, where is centering youth and voice? I mean, youth and voice. Oh my word. Where is centering youth and families in the whole process? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I would say, okay, so we're looking at, so what is the difference between this slide and then the next slide? Maybe that'll help explain.
Yep, that's a great question. Let's start there. And then we can talk a little bit about some of what's in the chat as well. And I know we have more people. So by making centering youth and families a value screen, it's not necessarily embedded in only one goal. The idea of using values was to sort of get out of siloing some of those values, equity, centering youth and families, et cetera. Because what the concern was that we talked about a little bit and that has come up is when we make the goal equity, when we make the goal centering, youth and families, then the other goals don't always do a good enough job of always considering that when they're deciding. So what we've done by making it a value is all 4 of these have to have that at the heart of the steps that we're creating, of the action steps and of the strategies. So it was a way to attempt to thread it or weave it throughout without putting it in sort of the box of a goal. Because when you make it a goal, then it gets lost in the other strategies, action steps, et cetera. Definitely open to conversation about whether that's feeling like it's working for people. But I do think it's a sort of unique way to try and do this. Whereas in other strategic plans I've seen, even from this group, we've made it a goal and then it becomes just only at that time and only in that way are we always thinking about that.
I
So like I
appreciate
said, sort
that.
of on, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
No, I appreciate that, and I think because there's been some conversations, I guess over kind of like the last few years or so, is that how do we navigate kind of centering youth and family voice versus appropriately engaging youth and family voice and partnering with the system, right? Because I think sometimes it's really difficult to create strategies or plan. I mean, our goals when the system kind of feels like there is one way of doing it versus family members or parents and caregivers or youth for that matter feeling like there is one way of doing it. So we continue to stay in those silos. So I guess one of my questions is, do we have a mechanism on how to integrate the two so that they can actually, meld together nicely, so that family and youth voice is centered, and we also, or family and youth voice partners with the system in order to.
I love that. I love that. And I think part of what you're seeing on 3 here is going to be the goal, right? The promotion of co-creation. And again, we can wordsmith these later, but it's exactly what you're saying. And not surprisingly, Alicia, for per usual, you're 2 steps ahead of me because you're like, let's get down to let's talk about how we're going to do it and what those steps are going to be. Because you and I both like to do that, which is great. That is a big part of what we're going to spend time at the retreat doing. If this is the goal, we all agree we want to be co-creating systems. Those are great words, right? We all love those words. How are we doing it? What are literally the strategies for that? So if you're open to sort of holding those great thoughts, I think that's a perfect segue into when we get together, because part of dealing with me when it comes to strategic planning is like, I'm not like big into super fluffy, wonderful words. I want to know and how are we getting there? And by what date and who's going to carry the load to do it. So I think that's spot on. So I appreciate that. Adam? Oh, you might be on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, I'm just.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Just hemming and hawing about what my actual question or comment is, trying to kind of flesh it out. I would agree, though, that when we look at system of care structures, we should have more of a focus on those more complex young folks at the initial stages and to solve that. And so to Anna's kind of statement about, are we trying to do, kind of the work for every kid, right? When we haven't really addressed the kids that need the most support and attention, and then have that cascade down as we're helping those kids and those young folks are improving, then we can continue to turn that focus lower on that pyramid. So I just want to make sure we don't lose that.
Yep. I have, I'm sure you can read my terrible handwriting. I agree. I think that's going to be really important. And one of the things I want to do, if it's okay with this group, is take that back and integrate it probably into the value screens, but take a look at the goals. It'll certainly be, I can't see how it isn't a strategy, right? Under improved access, bringing a focus to and working specifically on those intractable, entrenchable issues, etc. So I hear that and I agree that feedback needs to be integrated. I think it's definitely something that's missing. So I really appreciate you raising that back up. And I see some good comments in the chat too, and I'll be taking those notes. I'm going to copy and paste some of them right now before I lose them. And Ebony, jump right in.
Yeah. So I was just thinking of, piggybacking on what Anna had brought forward. and this is just a thought, and maybe it's named or it's more explicit throughout other places within the document, but I think being explicit around, we are trying to prevent, folks, youth from unaliving themselves. We're trying to prevent incarceration. We're trying to prevent homelessness and houselessness. So I just wonder, is there a way to add a little bit more explicitness and not sound too generic, or like, how do we just be intentional around that category, that most vulnerable or acute set of youth that in children, families that we're really trying to support and protect? And so just a thought.
I love that. As this group is probably tired of hearing me talk about, I think it's really important that the right youth are in the right system. And we don't want youth getting pushed into the juvenile legal system or child welfare when they could have been given the care they needed beforehand. So I'm always open to thinking about how we make that even more clear and how we understand that those are important partners to this group, but they're different partners, right? Those are partners that I think we're hoping don't have to be engaged or are engaged as last resort. So Ebony, I really appreciate that, and talking about multi-system involvement, et cetera. So I'm going to take that back also and think about how we work that in. Similarly, I can't imagine one of our strategies isn't going to be targeting specifically that. I think you guys, not surprisingly, are all sort of jumping one step ahead, and you're like, and we need to do this, and we need to do this. So you'll see that not in the document yet, because we're going to co-create that document together, but it's going to pop into the document as we keep having these conversations, because these will be the things added as strategies, and I'm already making notes.
Cool. Addie, you've got a hard stop at 3:30, right?
I do. I appreciate you honoring that.
We can squeeze in Emily Cooper, and I think that'll be the last question on this one for today.
And I will happily put my email address in for folks who either want to find time to chat or who want to send me feedback, or who are those wordsmithy folks who have thoughts on sort of how they'd like this to look a little different. Please, that's like the best place to get me that type of detailed information, so I don't lose it and I don't get it wrong. So I appreciate that. Emily, sorry for jumping in ahead of you.
No worries. I have two thoughts. One, I think, is going to be kind of consensus. I think most people will agree. The other one's a little more radical. I think on number two, and this is definitely wordsmithy, but improve equitable access to care. Because I think for some, access is a lot smoother than others. And again, that's based on multiple demographics, but I think it fits into three a little bit too. But I just think we need to make sure we keep the equity in all of our goals. And then the other thing, and this is more, I think, for the group to think about, but to me, if the System of Care Advisory Council is successful in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, I'm hoping it means that youth and families have tools and resources where they're not dependent on care. They're not dependent on systems. They're not depending on state actors. That we really, and I think about our own mission and vision about meeting youth and families where they are when they need it, that kind of thing. Like it's prevention. It's more upstream. It's like, and I think we'd just be remiss if we're coming together and talking about all of this, if we don't talk about some of that, because at the end of the day, we're talking about preserving families before they're even system involved. And so I just wanted to throw that out there, not to say I really love these four. I think these four are really important with some tweaks, but do we think about upstream? That's my last thought.
I think that is such a great thought to end on, because in my mind, and this might not be how everyone's thinking about it, but we can talk about it. And I'm getting more and more excited for the retreat now, really dorking out. But that is goal one to me, right? Like part of goal one is like, we're in a place, I came in at the end of the conversation where we're remembering that the best caregiver for a kid is their own family. And so we're resourcing the family if that's what is needed. And that's a piece of what the transformation looks like. So it doesn't feel to me like it's off base at all from what we're talking about. And again, that feels to me like one of the strategies is upstream preventative, We talked a lot about sort of like maintenance access was a term that this group came up with about that like prevention to the prevention work. So I see that in here, and I love the idea of as we get the permission to think about transforming the system and stepping away from what we know, because goal 2 is going to tackle what we know. Goal 1 can be really visionary. What does that include? And to me, this is definitely on the list. And as I hit 3:30 on the nose, I think that's like a great place to let people have a little bit of homework, unofficial homework, which is like on your, dog walk or your drive-in or your bike ride or your, end of your evening meditation, whatever your jam is, spending a couple minutes getting to, for once, get to be visionary about some of this. Right. Yes, and Judge Gates, I was just having that conversation about if you try to do everything, you'll actually do nothing. And I think I really appreciate that. And that too is part of why I thought goals 1 and 2 side by side would be a great way to create both space to do the visioning, but also space to think about the practical things to tackle right now for the youth, children, and families who need it. So per usual, this has been a really fun conversation, super thoughtful, lots of good insights. There will be more to come at the next meeting as we prepare to spend 2 days together. I also know cool things are happening, like potentially multicolored masks and fidget spinners and pipe cleaners and new crayons, and for me, really big white papers that stick to the wall. So I will look forward to seeing you all at your next meeting. I appreciate you being flexible with my time today, and you all know how to get a hold of me, but thanks for all the hard work that you're doing and for all your engagement on this process. Such a pleasure as always.
Thank you, Addie. All right, now we're going to move into our subcommittee reports. We should have an update from Oregon Youth Addiction Alliance, Family Advisory, Youth Council, Legislative Committee, and other committees such as DATA who would like to report out as well. So I will first call upon either Cameron or Caleb for the OYA update.
Yeah, I'll start us out. Just a quick update from me today, but we're also chugging along on our strategic plan. It's always good to get inspiration from Addie, who is obviously being paid to do this. Caleb and I have our supports, but it's good to know we're on the right track with everything. And yeah, just our strategic plan is set to end or be due a little bit before the end of the year. So we're starting conversations about whether we want OYA to be something that's becomes more of a subcommittee and less of a work group and extends beyond that. But that's just in talks right now and has to do with some legislation that we're still waiting on hearing back from, as seems like the story of everyone right now. So that's all from me, and I'll let Caleb finish the rest of our quick update.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron, and thank you so much to the full council for having us today. We are very grateful to be here and report on our council and our work. Cameron gave a good update on our strategic plan. We just finished our draft for our voting members to review and get back to us by our next meeting. In the last few meetings, if y'all haven't had the opportunity to come hang out with us yet, a few of us in this council have, and hopefully going to hear some of the outside perspective from not the scary youth asking y'all to come join us. We started out in this work. For those who have not heard of us, Oregon Youth Addiction Alliance was charged from House Bill 4002, and then our work right now has evolved into 2507 for the feasibility study of recovery schools. We actually have 3 youth that attend recovery schools, which is there is 2 currently in Oregon. Over the next, I believe, 2 years, there's going to be implementation of 8 more. But that being said, in May, what we covered was the big ideas we did community mapping when we began for ideas based on how do we go about this work in the 5 whys that we created for the challenge statements and the need not being met. And now we're going into the ways and means for our big ideas that came from those community mappings. And so we're also going to have some speakers from Texas Archway Academy, who was one of the first recovery schools in Texas. That's why I mentioned that, because we have guest speakers, and another one that's Gracelyn Crutzen from Chestnut Health Lighthouse. So not only do you get to engage in in our breakout groups for our ways and means for our big ideas, but you also get to hear some experts as well as individuals outside of the state and what they're doing successful. So we're going to break into our legal and carceral settings and educational settings for our breakout groups this time. And based off our strategic plan, we're going to go with our members and align it with our core support and our charter. And that is the update I would like to offer for those that visited or those who are voting members. Really quick to give an update on how it's been visiting the space or participating, just so that folks here know what that side of it's like.
Well, I'll report out just quickly on that. It's a very exciting space. Seeing Cameron and Caleb and Jimmy lead in that space has been really rewarding. So I appreciate the both of you leading in that. It's been really, really a great collaboration. Thank you. Adam has your hand. You have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to comment similarly. I had the opportunity to attend my first OYA meeting, and I've got them on my calendar now. They've got a pretty solid setup, guys. Like, we have some things to learn. They've got better memes. They've got music during breaks. And they actually have really well, it's really organized, and the content is really exciting too. But they set a really nice environment for their council meetings. So they're doing the good work and having fun while they're doing it. So I appreciate being welcomed.
Thank you. Anderson.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's a nice combination between that laid back aspect of connection and community and y'all getting stuff done, which has been really, really cool to see. And I try and bring into a lot of the other spaces that I'm in. And so yeah, y'all are inspiring, and I hope to come back again when it comes down to it and connect all of our work up together.
Great. Wonderful feedback. Thank you. And in the chat is the next meeting time. So please take note of that when we'll be meeting again. Now we're going to have a update from Alicia Overstreet on the Family Advisory Committee.
Hey, okay, so there's been a lot going on at the Family Advisory Committee. We have had to make quite a few changes, but it's all it's actually quite exciting, to be honest. So we started out with having a meeting about actually wanting to create or discuss training opportunities for parents and caregivers around basically all things IEPs and 504s and starting to kind of get in the weeds about and talking about what is IDD or intellectual and developmental disabilities, because we recognize that there was a need in certain areas and for certain populations in Oregon who could use or actually request or requested information about what does IDD actually mean, because there is that stigma that's still attached to it. So that was the initial thing that we wanted to the initial path we wanted to walk down. And then we got the opportunity to do what was it called? The family engagement plan with, or provide some feedback to the contractor that SOCAC has, Common Thread Consulting, who has done some community-based family engagement to talk to them and ask them about what do family members need and caregivers need across the state in order for them to feel engaged and valued and included in system, or when systems ask them questions or for feedback. So that whole plan was brought to the Family Advisory Committee, and we got to look over it and then made the decision that we're just going to buckle down for the rest of June, or kind of before June ends and before Common Thread leaves SOCAC, so that the information that is brought by the contractors can be included into the strategic planning retreat at the end of July, and that it is family member and caregiver informed. I think that is it, right? Like, that's what we're working on right now. So we have a couple of meetings scheduled over the next couple of days or next week or so, and hopefully we can get it all in and out the door before the end, or mid-June anyway, or to Common Thread anyway. And I think that's it. Wow. Oh, we have a meeting tomorrow. What, from 3:30 to 5:30, I believe it is.
Yeah, to 5.
5. Sorry.
And we're gonna have some music during our breaks too. So
are we?
Yeah, we're gonna do that.
It's not a competition in that.
Hey.
All right, now we'll have an update from Youth Council. I think Zafir left. Is Jesus here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, since we're talking about music, we play music at the beginning of every meeting. But, all right, everyone. I'm Jesus Nunez Pineda, she, they. I chair the Youth Council. Right now, we are currently working on reviewing and advising on the OSBA youth engagement kind of project they were tasked with. Just to kind of make sure that the information that they've gathered or what they have written down is reflective of what we have been saying, and that it is relevant to the work that we do. Yeah, sorry. I got really into a kick of exaggerating the pronunciation of the acronym, and now I can't stop doing that. But yeah, Oregon School-Based Health Authority Alliance. It's in the chat. And that's currently what we're working on right now. After that, we are planning on diving into the information from the Youth Data Action Party to try to, synthesize it a bit and help use that information to inform the SOCAC strategic plan. And that's all we got.
Great. Thank you, Jesus. Now we'll have Robin from the Legislative Committee.
I can make this super quick. We are still waiting to be scheduled in House Rules with House Bill 3835. We expect that to come soon. You can log into OLIS and track it if you'd like a notification to pop up in your box. We expect this to be a work session and there will be no more hearings on the bill. So that's where we're at. And we did cancel our meeting this week, so we are not having legislative committee tomorrow. Yes, Adam.
Yeah, are we at like the point in the session where it's post and go and they can post something and have a hearing an hour later, or are we at 24 hours? Do you know?
Good question. I think we're at 24 hours. Anna, we're at 24 hours still, right?
I asked Anna this morning and she thought so, but neither one of us were sure.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw latest was 24 hours.
Okay.
And Alicia says, any news on the other bill? Which other bill? Because there's a lot of those.
Council composition.
Oh, I don't know what the latest is. I haven't looked at that lately.
It has passed.
Oh, cool. There you go.
It came through with no funding. I did send a blue sheet to the governor's office suggesting that she sign the bill. And so we had originally talked about it having staffing associated with it for Karina's position, who processes stipends, for Joylene's position, who obviously prioritizes the structural changes that need to happen so youth and families can meaningfully participate in the work, and a comms person, which we have heard from like everybody in the world that we need to do better communications and outreach. However, so those were connected to the bill. It was stripped as it went through the process. So all the bill does, which is great and wonderful, is add 4 extra seats to the council, 2 for family advocates, 2 for youth advocates, or people with lived experience specifically. The staffing and funding piece, we hope will go through at the end of session OHA budget bill. So that's where all of that is at, Alicia, if you have other questions.
Okay. Yeah, so right now it's just a matter of waiting for the governor to sign it.
Well, it doesn't have an emergency clause on it. So that bill does not have an immediate impact on the health or safety of Oregonians, how many seats we have on the council. So it depends on, I think it goes into effect 91 days after the end of session.
Okay. And then, so somewhere between the time that it was filed and submitted and it passing both chambers, it got the crux of the whole thing, besides, adding the 4 seats, got taken out.
So it isn't in the language of the bill. If you read the 2925 that was submitted, it's the same bill that came out, but we had attached a fiscal impact statement to it saying, in order to effectively do this work, these are the resources we need. The legislature did not agree with us that we needed those resources in order to effectively do the work. So that is not a decision that we have any control over. They separated the two.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That clarifies things.
Thank you. I'll just report quickly that DEI we're meet in a week or so, and we'll be talking about and looking at what it means to be culturally responsive. Christy has gathered a lot of information from state agencies and how they view culturally responsive. So we're going to dig a little bit into that at our next meeting. And I'm going to call on Andrew and see if he has an update from data.
Oh my goodness, you called on me. I wasn't prepared. But thank you for putting me on the spot. What we've been doing in the data committee is sort of a lot of the groundwork to identify indicators to sort of measure change in the system that we could select from as we go into the strategic plan. So we've, Christy did a really nice job of compiling a jumping off point based on kind of what we've done in the past, plus the OHSU assessment, plus some other research. And so that's kind of moving along. And I think it will be sort of as ready as we can get it once the strategic plan lands and somebody looks at us and says, okay, how are we going to measure all this? So that's one bit, and it's all still lots of proxy measures and indirect stuff. So on a separate track, we are working to connect with the state's chief information officer to understand how they're working toward better data systems integration, improving, upgrading their the kind of software to facilitate, more ambitious projects in the future. So
Great.
that concludes my
Thank you.
report.
Thank you. And I also want to lift up, because we've mentioned her name several times here, Christy, Joylene, and Corinna. They do a lot of work for us in the subcommittee and overall. So I just want to, give a shout out to them. And I will turn it over to Adam.
All right. Did we mention Cody there in that? Because I feel like Cody was already called half a person, and so I just want to make it clear. Cody,
No, we didn't. We didn't.
Cody,
I'm sorry.
We appreciate you too, my friend, and you are, though you are a half staff person for us, you are a whole person in our
Right.
Thanks, all. I feel like I get to lead those jokes, so feel free to pile in. It never bothers me. I think it's funny. So thanks.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So next up, we have goodbye, see you soon to colleague and friend April Flint Gerner. She, for those of you that don't know, she's the child welfare director here. If you don't and you're on this call, I'm surprised. But she's leaving her role with us at the end of the month. We've got 20 minutes to hear her hopes for the future of Oregon and its youth and families, and then opportunity for us to say goodbye as well. So, April, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, my friends in the children's system of care. Oh, I hate being spotlighted. Oh man, y'all can see all the wrinkles that have crept onto my face and the gray hairs while sitting in this seat. It is my last meeting with the Children's System of Care Advisory, but I am not moving from the state. And while my role in the child serving world is changing, my passion and advocacy for why I got into this work in the first place has not gone away. Actually, it's gotten more intense. For those of you that don't know a lot about me, I got involved in the child welfare system from a place of great skepticism. I was working in community mental health in San Francisco when I made the decision to get a stipend to go to grad school to work in child welfare. And I thought, I'll work there for 2 years. I'll do my mandatory time in, and then I'll dip out. I always wanted to be a juvenile court judge my entire life. But I wanted to be a social worker behind the bench. And what it meant for me was that I wanted to go and work in all of the child serving systems and try to figure out, all the things, right? And, then I would go and I would get to sit in this seat that I thought had all the power to make the difference in children's lives. But I also remember back to where that desire started from. I was like, I couldn't have been more than like 5 years old. And I remember watching this television show where a young person was being harmed by their parent, their father, and had told their mother, and their mother believed them, and they were in a nasty custody battle. And I remember all of this, but I remember this is a 5-year-old's context, right? So who knows if this is real or not, but it was like after school special. I don't know why it was on television, but I remember that in the end, the mother advocating for her child and the safety of the child wasn't enough. The father had resources, he had money, and he was able to convince the world that she was crazy. and this, all I remember, and maybe that wasn't the end of the story, was that this child ended up going and living with this parent who had harmed her. And my sense of injustice for children was like born in this moment. I was mad. I was big mad at the fact that a child in danger, even if they have a safe family or a safe parent, often the likelihood that they're going to be protected and made safe is directly related to the privilege and the power of whoever is telling a different story. And anyway, I share that because it's not lost on me that, I'm sitting in this seat as the child welfare director, and there's so many young people out there that we are failing. And I don't mean just by child welfare, I mean by the broader child serving network. That the entire reason I got into this was so that children would have a voice, that they would be believed when they're in danger. And then specifically, that's why I wanted to be a juvenile court judge, because at the time I thought it was attorneys that had all the power, and the ultimate attorney was a judge, right? And then I learned that there's power to impact and advocate, and from lots of different seats. And I never made it to law school, and I haven't made it to become a judge. Who knows what'll happen? But I found myself stuck in child welfare. I just couldn't get out of it. And not because I fundamentally believe that child welfare is the end all be all of what families need. I believe that it's a place that is wrought with opportunities for growth and improvement. And I decided back in that time to join a child welfare agency, again from a place of I did not like child welfare. I didn't like what it was doing to Black and brown families, the way that it was being used to oppress and criminalize parents. I just thought, this is not what families need. And, so getting a county badge at the time was a big deal, because I thought, well, the only way I can go in there and do this is if I see an opportunity to try to help make it better. And I was always that caseworker who was asking too many questions, who was pushing the narrative, just always doing that. And, it's all really interesting to sit in this seat now, being a line worker that never quit. Still pushing the conversation about what is the role of a child protection agency, because what I saw happening in California was that the system was being used as a weapon against Black and brown families. And the poorer you were, however marginalized you were in society, there was a direct correlation to the likelihood that your family would come out with a good outcome. This was always about justice for me. It was always about justice for me. And as I step away from this particular seat and away from child welfare as a government employee, I will not be doing that again. I have learned enough about, from the inside, what does it look like when a system that is operated by the government attempts to live into its stated mission. I have learned a lot in these years. But my passion and commitment for justice is not changed. And the opportunity, I think, to be a part of the Oregon narrative hasn't changed, although I don't know what that's going to look like in specific. I have taken on a job to go and work with Casey Family Programs, which is a foundation, probably the biggest and most well-known system transformation foundation in the nation. And they specifically work on the reduction of foster care. There have to be other solutions for families than separation, criminalization, and surveillance of them. There have to be. Now, that does not mean that there aren't people out there that are doing horrific things to their children that need, and their children need to be protected. There's a both and somewhere that we haven't figured out as a nation. And I think the one thing that couple of things I want to leave you with, and this is just April. This isn't April as the child welfare director. This is April who got into this work for the right reasons, stayed for the right reasons, despite what anybody might think about my leadership or the leadership within child welfare. It is full of people who care, really, really, really care, and really want good things for families, and often feel like they don't have what it takes to get those good things to families. But the couple of little things that I want to leave you with is, I think about child safety as an experience. It's something that it's hard to even quantify it or to describe it. But children know it. They know when they are surrounded by adults who will act when danger is near. It doesn't mean that they're perfect parents. It doesn't mean that the world will not ever have something, that might make their conditions unsafe. The world can be dangerous. But my child always knew that there were 50 adults around that he could go to that would act if he was in danger, even if that meant I was the one putting him in danger. And my hope for Oregon is that the conversation and the distance between child abuse and child safety gets much more clear. Because at the end of the day, all of us want the same things. We want children to experience safety. And we don't want to use systems to oppress families. And we haven't figured it out yet. Child welfare does not have the answers, y'all. What we have is a lot of learning that we've done, a lot of mistakes that we've made, and a workforce full of people who are committed to continuing to be in the conversation. The second thing that I want to say is that nobody learns from training. If you know anything about how I got to Oregon, it's because my expertise is workforce development. Not all the other things, but workforce development specifically. And nobody learns from a PowerPoint training. They just don't. Our brains don't remember what we learned. We learn from experience and coaching, feedback, and opportunity for our brains to slow down and get feedback. As a parent, I probably made a million mistakes. I don't make the same mistakes today with my almost 25-year-old that I did when I was 25. But that was because I learned and I was in an environment where people could give me feedback. I could change my behavior and become a better and better and better parent. We have no room in our state right now for people to learn how to safely interact with children. There's no room for them to actually build skill in terms of how you as an adult interact with children. And my hope for Oregon is that we find pathways to invest in our workforce and invest in parents so that they can learn to safely interact with children, and that they can learn when they make mistakes, that they have an environment where they can reflect on those mistakes and get better and better and better at parenting. Somebody said it earlier, the best intervention for children in crisis is good parenting. And so I'm hoping that whether you are a parent or a caregiver, or you are representing parents or caregivers or other adults that care about children, investing in people learning how to interact with children in good ways is so much better bang for your buck than criminalizing everybody for making mistakes. That is, again, this is not as April as the child welfare director. This is April as a mom, April as somebody who really cares about not using the system as a weapon against families. And, as someone who has learned over the last 30 years that we have to treat people like we want to be treated when we were making our mistakes and we're learning our lessons. And then I think the last little thing I'll say is I've really been impressed with the hard conversations that you all have been willing to have in this advisory. It has felt hard. It has felt hard and worth it. Absolutely worth it. It has been an honor to sit in this seat. It has been an honor to be in the conversation. That's all I ever wanted, was a chance to be in the conversation about what families deserve and an opportunity to try to do my best to help us get there. My advice to you all is try not to tokenize the voices of the people that are with lived experience on this advisory. It's not fair. Build relationships with other advisories. There are some other people with lived experience and communities that are lifting up their voices that are not being heard yet. And I am really hopeful that as Rolanda comes to sit in this seat to do what I think is going to be exactly what Jana just did, which was brilliant, which is to say, we've got so much better to do. And I really think Rolanda is going to be a really good person to lean in on safety, lean in on when children are in our care, are they experiencing safety? Full stop, right? I think she's going to be an amazing partner as we hold ourselves better accountable for what is happening with children in foster care. And as I kind of leave this particular seat, but not from advocacy for families, advocacy for systems not being oppressive to families, and advocacy for workforce full of people who really care and want to do a good job, I could think of no better person. And I made the recommendation. I think that Rolanda has got the relationships, she's got the experience, she knows self-sufficiency and child welfare. And I'm just so grateful. I trust her. I trust her with the legacy. I think from Rebecca and myself in the last several years of making progress. And I know that she's here, and I want to give her a couple of minutes to say some things. I will miss you all from this seat, but I know I will see you again, because I'm gonna be vocal, just from a different place and space. And I'm gonna take care of my parents, because that's what I gotta go do right now. Rolanda, meet the Children's System of Care. This group, they are going to be in it with you. And I know you know all too well the challenges that families are facing, having been a district manager for so long in Washington County. And I have to say this out loud. There's a reason there's no temp lodging in Washington County. And I want Rolanda to come and talk to this council about why. The partnerships, the trust, the creativity, the innovation, all of the things. And I know it's not perfect, but you've got one amazing leader coming to the helm. So Rolanda, you all, thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to preach at you. And I just want to hand it over to Rolanda to introduce herself to the system of care.
Thank you, April. Good afternoon, everyone. I actually, it's always hard to start speaking after April, because she's such an incredible, articulate, child welfare, knowledgeable human being. I always feel extremely intimidated after walking after her, and trying to speak a little bit about the work. I'm grateful for all the work that she has done in Oregon, and I definitely will be leaning on her in her new role in Casey, because I'm going to need all the support that will be coming with this position. I first want to recognize this is a big job, and the responsibility of this role I don't want to minimize. I walk into it knowing the impact that it could have on kids and families statewide. And so I do want to say that I don't take this position lightly. For those of you who don't know me, I actually know a few people. I know Adam on this call, and I met Anna last week, and I know a few people, and of course Selby. To start from that, I've been on the System of Care Regional Committee for the last 12 years that I've been in Washington County, and I have been super active on that. I think out of the region, I'm probably one of the few DMs that consistently is working with the system of care on how we can improve lives for kids and families. And so I look forward to working with all of you from a statewide perspective. And I just want to give you a little bit about myself. I know April mentioned that I've been with the agency for a long time. I have. I've been with DHS for 27 years, and all of my entire 27 years have been on the delivery. And so taking this role is definitely a new thing for me. But what I will tell you is my heart will never change on how we serve families. So no matter what we do in central office, the focus will always be on how we're serving families at the local level, because ultimately that's the biggest impact we can have. I think April talked a little bit about how she came into this work. I'm not going to bore you with all of that. I will tell you though, as an immigrant, and so is my husband, we're both immigrants. Our kids are first generation Americans. And having a family that has experienced substance abuse with really close my brother, there's no secret around that. And having seeing my family come rally around my brother and his child, and over the years not having child welfare involved in our family, and really picking up that work and caring for him. I think April spoke about how does the community come and rally around families versus child welfare. For a long time, I struggled a little bit in terms of how our work was. And then Rebecca came. And then we started to talk about the vision for transformation and how do we put families at the forefront. And April has continued that vision. So for me, I'm walking into an amazing vision that has set the tone for the state. That won't be my focus in terms of changing that. I think she alluded to it. Really, my focus is really safety across the system. I truly wholeheartedly believe kids do better with their families. Kids do better in their communities, and we need to figure out how to support families to ensure that they can stay with them safely. I think that's the only thing that I want to like preface. So I just want to leave you with that. It's my understanding that actually I won't be on this group. I think Lacey Andreessen's going to be taking over this seat. So she is an extremely valuable person and knows a lot about the system. So she's going to be an asset to all of you, but I'm happy to come back and chat with all of you about anything that you think would be important. And I saw Selby. Thank you, Selby, for highlighting that. I think we've done some amazing initiatives in the Tri-County that have really improved how we serve families without having them touch the system. And I think that that continues to be really my hope. And how do we serve families that need help, and we don't have to bring them into our system to serve them. And so with the work that we're doing with the Human Service Group, I think April mentioned we're doing an assessment and restructuring of our agency as well as a safety assessment. I'm hoping that that's going to really sort of help us figure out how to serve families and support them in a different way, with self-sufficiency coming alongside to help families be successful. I don't have anything else to add. I love working in Washington County. This has been an amazing county to work in. I have some amazing partners here, and it's definitely it's been hard to leave. But hopefully we'll have somebody who comes in that will also lead the same efforts around serving families. So thank you.
Thank you. And yes, good to see you, Rolanda. Yes, I've had the opportunity to work with you over the years as well. Questions, comments for April or Rolanda? Nobody, really?
Oh, I'll jump in.
Okay.
April, I'm going to miss you terribly. You've been so fun to work with, and so fun to run around the building with. And just, I've learned an awful lot and appreciate your spirit and what you bring to the table. And yeah, you got big shoes to fill. It's going to be rough. So fair winds. You're going to be great. And if you ever need anything, you know how to find me.
I appreciate that, Robin. And plenty of people are sending me little private messages. So, maybe people don't want to be as bold as Robin, but I do appreciate it. I know, and that was fun to run around the building with you, Robin. That was one of my favorite days.
That's weird. Also, I'll just say that's weird that was one of your favorite days, walking around the Capitol. Like, okay.
Her and Anna run around the building. That was actually pretty fun.
That takes a special personality. I'm not going to get my DSM out for that one, but
I mean this respectfully about myself. Absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate some of that. Just the directness of what you said about people's inability to learn here. I think that is felt by families, by staff at as a former child welfare employee myself, I felt that way sometimes. And as a provider on the nonprofit side, I know that the providers feel that way sometimes and most of the time as well right now. And so it's an interesting through line that I think I hadn't considered before, but one that, yeah, hopefully unites us in a way that we can shift the way we look at folks. Because yeah, it was really well said. And yeah, Rolanda, like I look forward to working with you. You got a big job. Please let us know what we can do to support, assist, right? Like, we want to see fewer kids come into child welfare, and we want to see those that do enter the system be supported and their families as well, and get them home as quick as we can. So, so I think while I'm sad to see April go, I'm excited to get to work with you on a statewide level. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Adam.
Any last thoughts for these two?
Can I just say it is very rare for child welfare directors to leave on their own accord, and we have had 2 child welfare directors leave on their own accord in a row, which may be some sort of global record. But
Don't
also
jinx
the
it for
average,
Rolanda.
yeah, well, maybe we'll get 3 in a row. The average tenure for child welfare directors is also 18 months. So if you imagine trying to learn and figure out how to do that incredibly complicated job, like I didn't even understand this job for 18 months. I cannot imagine trying to do a job like that without having a full and deep understanding of it. So I just want to acknowledge that, like, while our child welfare system has so much room to grow and continue to improve, the steadiness of leadership that we had from Rebecca to April and now from Rolanda is actually a great strength in our system. And I hope that we can continue to partner with Rolanda, give her the hard feedback that she needs so that she can continue to improve the system. But also recognize that she's stepping into one of the hardest jobs in the Oregon state government, and hopefully not tear her down as she's stepping up onto that very, very difficult stage.
Thank you, Anna. If I can just say one thing that you just said, my style is pretty direct. I'd like to think I'm pretty accessible too. So if any of you have any thoughts or concerns or things you want to share with me, don't ever hesitate to reach out. That's how I've ran Washington County in terms of people just access, in terms of availability. And I want to hear the feedback. You know, it'll be hard, but we can't fix something if we don't know about it. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
I appreciate that reminder too, because although I'm leaving, and my last week and a half is going to be vacation, so technically my last week starts tomorrow, being in the office. But I really do welcome any conversation with any of you. I would just love to hear any feedback that you have for me. It's really hard to get feedback in seats like this. Not hard for me as an individual, but you don't often have you think you're putting out one thing and maybe you're putting out something totally different. And I really do welcome the opportunity to continue to grow from being in relationship with many of you. So I'm really open to that.
Emily's got her hand up.
So I'll just say, April, like I put it in the chat, you really are an exceptional leader. And I'll just give everyone an example of this. We were in litigation for 5 years. We were at a fairness hearing, and you could have given me the cold shoulder and walked by, and instead you came over and you were like, we're doing this together. And I've been practicing as a lawyer for 2 decades, and I've never had someone do that. And then to have one of the youth I represent see you as a mentor now, like that says a lot about who you are. And I was so sad to know that you were leaving. But I also understand making the right decision for yourself. And I also think Casey family is phenomenal and so lucky to have you. But you are really unique and you will really be missed. And I say this knowing that sometimes we're on the other side of the table, but I think at the end of the day, I knew that you and I are both squarely behind youth. And so that allows a lot of tough conversations sometimes to happen because we had the same goal. And so I really, really, really am sad and I miss you. And I'm like, maybe we shouldn't have sued the state of Oregon and then April would still be here. But anyway, it's not about me. It's about you and your family. And But you're just exceptional. I've never met anyone like you.
I appreciate that. And the hug was genuine. It is. I really believe that we've got really good people in this state that are going to help figure this thing out. We've got to. We have to. These kids deserve so much better than what they're getting. So I appreciate that, Emily. That means quite a bit.
Well, yeah, you will be missed. I will, like, we got to keep you humble, though. You do have a fatal flaw. And it's that you're a fan of the Golden State Warriors, bandwagoner, and I wish we had more time to dig into that. But
100% thought you were going to say Duke.
But
He roots for all the wrong
Oh,
teams.
you weren't supposed to say that.
but we need to move on. So we don't have time to dig into that today. Go Blazers. Yeah. All kidding aside, like, we appreciate you, and I wish you the best. And yeah, I'm sure we'll cross paths again. Annette, I am giving it back to you for some housekeeping.
All right. Can I have the housekeeping slide?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was sharing. Here you go.
All right. New meeting structure starts in September. We'll be going to a 2-meeting per month structure, a couple of hours each meeting, and some of the times will be later. So stay tuned for that. The Portland DEC Academy is June 10th and 11th. I think we've gotten some emails on that, so please sign up. SOCAC Strategic Planning Retreat is in Salem, July 28th and 29th. Book hotel rooms by June 27th. So if you're planning on attending that, please book your hotel room. Public meeting law training is August the 5th, 2025. There is a stipend pause or delay for July. So while we transition to a new system, so that'll be stipends will be delayed for the month of August. And I have a little thing that's going on in my community. On June 21st, we will be hosting, or I'll be participating in, a Juneteenth parade. We'll leave from Martin Luther King Grade School and walk about 1.5 miles down to a park where there'll be celebrants. So I invite each one of you to come and attend, spread the word about SOCAC. I do accept swag. If you have any swag you want me to hand out to the participants, I can do that too, to make the system of care come alive for folks. So please reach out. So if you want to attend, just get in touch with me. It'll be great. Thank you, April. Happy Juneteenth to you as well. All right, so that's what I have for housekeeping. Turning it over to Adam.
All right, Jill. Yep. So that's it. Thanks for being here. Next meeting is July 1st. Happy Pride. Happy Juneteenth. Happy summer. Yeah, I hope you all take good care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you soon, I'm sure. So bye, everybody.